It began, as all legends do, in silence, deep beneath the waves, where light fades, and courage is measured by how long a man can endure the dark. The war on the surface was chaos, but down here it was personal. A duel between man and machine, breath and pressure, death and patience. Among the thousands who fought this invisible war, one name would rise above them all, whispered with awe by comrades, cursed with dread by enemies. Otto Kretschmer, Germany's deadliest U-boat ace. Calm, calculating and fearless, he turned the Atlantic into a hunting ground, sinking more ships than any other submarine commander in history. To his crew he was a genius, to his enemies a phantom, to history a paradox. The man who embodied both the brilliance and the brutality of the U-boat war. This is the entire history of Otto Kretschmer, the rise, the reign, and the reckoning of the Tonnage King. The story of Otto Kretschmer began long before the thunder of war. Born in 1911 in the Bavarian town of Heidenau, he came of age in a Germany haunted by defeat and humiliation. The scars of the First World War ran deep. A broken navy, a broken nation. Yet the young Kretschmer was drawn to the sea, to the idea of precision, discipline, and control. He joined the Reichsmarine in 1930, a quiet, serious cadet with an intellect as sharp as the steel hulls he would one day command. When the secret U-boat program began to grow under the shadow of Hitler's ambitions, Kretschmer was among its rising stars, patient, precise, and utterly devoted to his craft. He studied navigation, engineering, and tactics with an obsession that bordered on art. And when war came in September 1939, he was ready. Kretschmer's first command was U-23, a small coastal Type II submarine, cramped, slow, and fragile. Yet even with this modest vessel, he showed a talent that could not be ignored. He stalked his prey not through brute force, but through cunning and patience. He would surface at night, attack with his deck gun, and slip away before the enemy could react. In the cold waters of the North Sea, he learned his craft, reading the ocean, predicting the convoy's rhythm, and striking not when expected, but when least anticipated. It was here that he forged his doctrine, a philosophy of silent mastery. His motto was simple: one torpedo, one ship. By 1940, Kretschmer was given command of a new weapon, the Type 7B U-boat, designated U-99. Sleek, fast, and deadly, it became his instrument of perfection. From the moment he took command, the sea became his domain. Kretschmer's patrols through the North Atlantic and the western approaches became legend. He would dive beneath the waves by day, surface by night, and strike with surgical precision. While other commanders relied on swarms, Kretschmer preferred solitude, operating alone, stalking convoys in darkness. His periscope barely breaking the surface, he would glide silently into the midst of enemy formations, so close that his crew could hear the engines of the merchant ships above. Then, with calm precision, he would fire one torpedo per target, never wasteful, always deliberate. His accuracy was legendary. Kretschmer's rise through the ranks of the U-boat aces was meteoric. In March 1941, after less than 2 years of combat, he had sunk more than 270,000 tons of Allied shipping, more than any other U-boat commander. The British called him Silent Otto for his uncanny ability to strike without warning and vanish without trace. To his men, he was both demanding and fair, a leader who expected perfection but shared every hardship. Life aboard U-99 was claustrophobic and perilous, yet Kretschmer's calm steadiness kept fear at bay. He insisted on discipline in the smallest details: clean uniforms, silent movement, total focus. When the tension rose, he would offer a quiet word or a rare smile, and the crew's courage would steady. In the darkness of the Atlantic, he was their compass. But beneath the mastery was a moral complexity that history still debates. Kretschmer fought with precision, yet he fought for a cause led by tyranny. He saw himself as a naval officer, not a Nazi ideologue, but his victories fueled a propaganda machine that glorified the U-boat war. German radio hailed him as a hero. Posters bore his image. His tonnage total was broadcast to the nation, to the Allies. He was a symbol of menace, the face of the invisible war that threatened to starve Britain into submission. Yet Kretschmer viewed his work as science, not savagery. He respected his enemies, sometimes even surfacing after a sinking to offer survivors directions or food. To him, war was not chaos. It was mathematics, precision, and fate. The end of his reign came not in triumph, but in fire. On the night of March 17th, 1941, U-99 attacked convoy HX-112 off the coast of Ireland. Kretschmer sank 2 ships before the escorts closed in. This time, the hunters were ready. Depth charges thundered through the deep, shaking the U-boat like an earthquake. Lights flickered. Pipes burst. The pressure grew unbearable. Kretschmer tried to escape, maneuvering his crippled submarine through the darkness, but the sea was relentless. The British destroyers HMS Walker and HMS Fanuc, led by Captain Donald McIntyre, trapped him. With his boat flooding and his men facing death, Kretschmer made the hardest choice of his life. He surfaced and surrendered. At 2 in the morning, the ocean swallowed U-99. For the first time, the Tonnage King was defeated. Captured and taken to Britain as a prisoner of war, Kretschmer was interrogated but treated with respect. His record spoke for itself. 47 ships sunk, 274,000 tons of Allied shipping destroyed. He had fought with brilliance and courage, and even his enemies recognized it. Yet as the war dragged on, Kretschmer sat in captivity, watching from afar as the U-boat arm he had helped shape was annihilated. By the time Germany surrendered in 1945, over 30,000 U-boat sailors were dead. The Atlantic, once his hunting ground, had become their grave. After the war, Kretschmer's life took a quieter turn. Released in 1947, he returned to a broken nation and a shattered navy. Yet the sea still called to him. When West Germany formed its new navy, the Bundesmarine, Kretschmer returned, not as a warrior, but as a teacher. He helped train a new generation of naval officers, emphasizing professionalism, restraint, and respect. The silent predator of the Atlantic had become a mentor, shaping the navy of a democratic Germany. It was a quiet redemption, though the ghosts of his past would never fully fade. Otto Kretschmer died in 1998, at the age of 86, fittingly, while on a cruise in the Atlantic. The ocean that had defined his life claimed him one final time. His story remains one of contrast, of brilliance and tragedy, duty and morality, mastery and futility. He was the ultimate submariner, the man who made the ocean his battlefield, his prison, and his home. Today, the wrecks of his victims still rest beneath the waves, rusted hulks lying silent on the ocean floor. And somewhere in that same vast sea, the spirit of U-99 drifts through the dark, a reminder of the man who once ruled the depths with calm precision and unshakable will. The story of Otto Kretschmer is not just a tale of war. It is a meditation on obsession, discipline, and the price of mastery. He proved that in the darkest places, greatness and damnation can exist side by side. Tonight we descend once more into those shadowed waters, into the world of periscopes and silence, of courage and consequence. This is the entire history of Otto Kretschmer, Germany's deadliest U-boat ace, the master of the Atlantic, and the man who turned war beneath the waves into an art of perfection and survival. Before we begin, tell me, where in the world are you tuning in from, and what time is it for you tonight? Are you somewhere drifting off under the quiet hum of the night, or far across the seas, listening as the echoes of the deep carry his story to you? Wherever you are, take a deep breath, settle in, and let me know. I'd love to hear where in time and place you're joining us from tonight. Autumn 1926. Heidenheim and der Brenz, Württemberg, Germany. The morning train to Flensburg hissed in the station yard as a young man in a sharply pressed grey uniform stepped aboard, carrying a worn leather valise stamped Otto Kretschmer. The nation he served had no navy worth its name, bound by the Treaty of Versailles to a mere 15,000 sailors and a ban on submarines. Yet the 17-year-old cadet's eyes carried none of the defeat of Weimar Germany. They carried precision. British Naval Intelligence File, ADM 223, 419th later, described him as restrained, reserved, methodical, the kind of youth who memorizes regulations word for word. The German Navy, or Reichsmarine, in which he enrolled, maintained only 6 obsolete pre-war torpedo boats and a handful of light cruisers. It was a school of discipline, not conquest. But within its narrow walls, ambition found quiet forms. Otto's generation entered a navy that officially denied aggression, yet secretly cultivated the skills to wage it again. The cadet who boarded that train was not loud, not rebellious. He was already practicing silence as an art. By the spring of 1927, at the Marineschule Merwick in Flensburg, Cadet Kretschmer's instructors noted a precision bordering on obsession. Naval records from Class 2 1926 describe his navigation scores as consistently above 98% accuracy. He plotted coastal bearings down to half a nautical mile, recalculating until errors vanished. Training in the Reichsmarine emphasized the Cadaver-Korsam, or corpse obedience, drilled into recruits by petty officers who measured every salute and every bootlace. Yet even within this rigid system, Otto stood apart, not from arrogance, but from control. He never shouted, never flinched, and never complained. Instructors wrote that his handwriting looked like machine print, every letter identical. Such precision had practical value. In an era without sonar or radar, navigation depended on mental geometry and clockwork timing. A single degree off course could mean disaster. Otto's calm under pressure foreshadowed the commander who would one day trust mathematics over emotion in the chaos of battle. To understand the young cadet's world, one must compare it to what his British counterparts were learning across the North Sea. In 1928, at Dartmouth's Royal Naval College, British midshipmen trained for Empire patrols, not future restrictions. Their fleet boasted over 200 capital ships, supported by extensive colonial docks from Gibraltar to Singapore. In contrast, the Reichsmarine maintained only a dozen major vessels totaling less than 60,000 tons of displacement. Yet the German system compensated with an intensity of instruction unmatched anywhere else in Europe. Where British cadets learned leadership through social polish, German trainees studied the torque curves of diesel engines and the hydrodynamics of torpedo wakes. Discipline replaced equipment, ideas replaced ships, and beneath the veneer of Versailles compliance, officers like Admiral Erich Raeder already studied how to rebuild a submarine force under new names and foreign flags. Otto, though unaware of the full scope, absorbed the mentality of clandestine preparation, precision as rebellion. The seeds of that rebellion took root in practical exercises disguised as merchant navigation. Between 1928 and 1930, the Reichsmarine sent select cadets, including Kretschmer, aboard civilian training vessels like the Niobe and Gorch Fock. Officially, these were seamanship cruisers. Unofficially, they taught tactics forbidden by Versailles, night maneuvers, silent signaling, and submerged detection using modified hydrophones. A later Allied intelligence report, CIU, document 3114, described these voyages as floating classrooms in evasion. Otto learned to calculate torpedo firing angles on scrap paper using merchant ship silhouettes as theoretical targets. His fellow cadets joked that he practiced attacks on clouds, tracing imaginary intercepts through the fog. Every exercise blended navigation, patience, and silence, the triad that would define his wartime reputation. The lessons had no immediate battlefield, but they forged the foundation of a doctrine Germany was not yet allowed to admit existed. Training became subversion, conducted with a slide rule. By 1929, as Germany's political center crumbled under economic collapse, the Navy clung to the illusion of order. Kretschmer's diary, fragments of which survived the war and were later translated by British interrogators, contains no political comment, only notes on wind drift, compass deviation, and ship routines. A man's worth is measured by the precision of his watch, one entry reads. This obsession with timing mirrored the Reichsmarine's philosophy, punctuality as patriotism. The instructors at Kiel Naval Academy repeated the creed that discipline must precede expansion. Admiral Raeder, secretly coordinating with shipyards at Kiel and Bremen, drafted memoranda on educational infrastructure for future fleet enlargement, code for the rearmament that would violate Versailles within a decade. Otto's superiors saw in him a model of restraint and reliability, the perfect vessel for the ambitions they could not yet declare. His silence was both shield and signal, the mark of a man who could carry forbidden orders without ever needing to speak them aloud. A dinner in early 1930 revealed how that silence interacted with defiance. In a mess hall at Kiel, a group of officers debated the naval clauses of Versailles over stewed potatoes and weak beer. One lieutenant, embittered by the treaty's bans, declared, "A nation that cannot dive cannot rise." Kretschmer, then only 21, listened without comment, though witnesses recalled the faintest tightening at his jaw. When pressed for his opinion, he replied simply, "We shall learn everything, even what we are forbidden to learn." The remark, recorded in instructor Kapitän Leutnant Lürsen's annual report, encapsulated his character. Others spoke of revenge. Otto spoke of preparation. It was not anger that defined him, but precision born of patience. That philosophy, learn now, strike later, became the invisible backbone of Germany's secret naval revival. He was already the silent Otto, years before the name reached the Atlantic. Technical skill without ideology made him valuable to any regime, and by the time the Nazis rose to power in 1933, that neutrality made him adaptable. While other officers aligned themselves with party slogans, Kretschmer remained a naval professional. British interrogation summaries from 1946 emphasized this detachment, noting he served systems, not slogans. His technical notebooks, preserved at the Naval Academy archives in Merwick, contain equations for submerged buoyancy control and estimated compression rates at depths exceeding 100 meters, knowledge no cadet was officially permitted to possess under Versailles. He was teaching himself the science of submarines in a navy that was not supposed to have them. It was not disobedience, it was foresight. Each formula represented quiet defiance written in ink. The cadet who refused to shout would one day command silence across oceans. When Otto Kretschmer graduated in 1930, Germany's navy remained small, outwardly compliant, and politically irrelevant. Yet the graduates of his class would later form the skeleton crew of the Kriegsmarine's U-boat arm, officially reborn in 1935. British analyst reviewing his personnel file after the war wrote that his calm manner concealed an almost pathological dedication to control. That control began not in the conning tower, but in the lecture hall, in the rhythmic ticking of a stopwatch, and the exactness of a navigational bearing. The young man from Heidenheim did not dream of war. He dreamed of mastery. The silent cadet of the Weimar years would become the most lethal submarine commander of the Atlantic, his calm forged in the years when Germany pretended to have no navy. The question that lingered, as his name later spread through Allied dispatches, was simple and haunting. What happens when precision learns how to kill? The answer waited beneath the waves, in the chapter yet to come. June 18th, 1935, London, Admiralty House, Whitehall. Beneath the chandeliers of the cabinet room, two signatures crossed a treaty that would reshape Europe's oceans. Joachim von Ribbentrop for Germany, Sir Samuel Hoare for Britain. The Anglo-German Naval Agreement legalized a fleet that had been, until that moment, a ghost. It permitted Germany to build warships up to 35% of Britain's surface tonnage and 45% of its submarine tonnage. On paper, that equaled 52,700 tons of U-boats, roughly 100 vessels of Type 7 size. British Prime Minister Stanley Baldwin called it an anchor of peace. In Berlin, Admiral Erich Raeder called it a key disguised as a treaty. The document, numbered CMD 4954 in the British archives, effectively ended the Versailles restrictions without a single shot fired. Within weeks, orders were dispatched to Germania Werft, Kiel, and Deutsche Werke AG to prepare slipways for the first German submarines built in 20 years. The wolves were being born beneath the polite applause of diplomats. On February 11th, 1936, at the Kiel shipyard of Germania Werft, the first hull slid into the icy Baltic, U-1, designation V-79, Type 2A. She displaced only 254 tons surfaced and carried a mere 5 torpedoes, yet her launch marked a seismic return. Photographs from Bundesarchiv, Bild 146-1984-05509, show Donit standing near the slipway, his cap brim shadowing his eyes, as the tricolour fluttered above the conning tower. Technically, the Type 2 was a coastal training boat, an innocuous term crafted to avoid alarming London. In practice, it was a compact laboratory of hydrodynamic experimentation. Its MAM 6V4046 diesels generated 700 horsepower each, propelling the hull to speeds of 13 knots on the surface and 7 submerged. Every rivet, every pressure joint was a rediscovered craft. What Versailles had tried to erase, the engineers at Kiel were now recreating from memory, blueprint, and stolen data. U-1's small hull carried not just torpedoes, it carried defiance measured in tons and volts. Compared to Britain's O-class and the French redoubtable boats, Germany's Type 2 looked almost toy-like. The British subs displaced over 1,500 tons and could patrol for 12,000 kilometers without resupply. The Type 2 managed barely 2,800, but the difference was philosophy, not merely tonnage. Western fleets believed in endurance, the reborn Kriegsmarine believed in agility. The German design emphasized dive speed, the time between alarm and full submersion was just 36 seconds, nearly half the time required by British designs. Its smaller hull also made sonar detection more difficult, a practical advantage in the shallow Baltic and North Seas. This was the essence of German doctrine under constraints. Make weakness behave like strength. Where Britain trusted steel, Germany trusted stealth. The U-boat would not need to match the enemy's size if it could master invisibility. In that paradox, Admiral Raeder saw strategic potential. In that silence, Karl Dönitz saw opportunity. Dönitz, a veteran of UB-68 and survivor of the Great War, began developing his new theory almost immediately. His 1937 memorandum, Übergruppenoperationen von Unterseebooten, on group operations of submarines, circulated among select officers under file code KM 10737. The concept was simple yet revolutionary. Individual boats would no longer hunt alone, but attack as a coordinated pack. Each U-boat would radio sightings via encrypted shortwave to a central command at Kiel, allowing simultaneous interception. The British dismissed it as academic fantasy, citing radio triangulation risks. Yet field trials conducted with U-26, U-27, and U-35 during Baltic exercises in late 1937 proved the opposite. When communication was timed within 2 minutes of contact, interception success rates rose from 24% to over 60%. Dönitz later described the sensation as a return of the pack to the hunt. The old lone wolf doctrine of 1917 had evolved. The new generation would not just attack, it would coordinate instinctively. Among the first to volunteer for this untested service was Oberleutnant Sol C. Otto Kretschmer. In April 1937, stationed with the destroyer Theodor Riedel Z6, he requested transfer to the U-boot warfare despite the clear dangers. His application, preserved in the Naval Personnel File No. 3498-37, cites a single line under reason for transfer to be where precision decides survival. The U-boat branch offered no prestige, no comfort, and no margin for error. The average life expectancy of a submarine crewman, even in peacetime training, was already measured in months. But for Kretschmer, the underwater domain represented ultimate control, machinery, mathematics, and discipline fused into one environment. Assigned to U-35 under Kapitänleutnant Werner Lott, he learned the fundamentals of silent running, ballast trimming, and attack geometry. Every maneuver demanded calm calculation. The cadet who once charted imaginary torpedo paths on paper now performed them beneath 40 meters of real seawater. He had found his natural element. Technical performance data from those early years reveal a fleet still in its adolescence. Type I and Type II boats recorded mechanical failures in 32% of dives, primarily in the high-pressure air systems. The Naval Engineering Bureau at Kiel issued Report No. 21738, recommending reinforced valve assemblies and doubled gasket seals for the new Type 7 series. By mid-1938, those improvements reduced casualty rates by nearly half. Type 7A, displacing 754 tons surfaced, became the standard ocean-going model. It carried 14 torpedoes, had a maximum submerged range of 90 kilometers at 4 knots, and a surface range of 6,500 kilometers. For comparison, the contemporary British T-class required twice the displacement for similar reach. The German engineers, led by Dip.Ing. Heinrich Bussmann, had turned limited tonnage into mathematical efficiency. Every kilogram saved in steel was spent on endurance. The constraints of the treaty had become a blueprint for innovation. Inside the Admiralty's intelligence branch, doubts began to surface. A 1938 memorandum from the British Naval Intelligence Division NID 938s warned that the Germans are constructing submarines of remarkable rapidity, exceeding declared quotas. British analysts calculated production rates approaching 6 boats per quarter, double the legal figure implied by the treaty. Yet Berlin insisted all vessels were training units. The deception worked because it was bureaucratic, not bold. While politicians debated semantics, the slipways never slept. By late 1938, the Kriegsmarine possessed 26 operational U-boats, with 8 more in advanced construction. Behind the diplomatic veneer, the wolves were sharpening their teeth. And as storm clouds gathered over Europe, the Royal Navy realized too late that peace had been traded for paperwork. What began as regulation had become rearmament by stealth. September 1st, 1939, Wilhelmshaven Naval Base. As dawn broke, Donitz received the coded message Fall Weiss beginned. Case White begins. The invasion of Poland had started. In the submarine pens nearby, Kretschmer and his comrades prepared their boats for real war patrols. The years of restraint and rehearsal were over. Britain would declare war within 48 hours, and the underwater hunters would finally be unleashed. Within that moment, the gamble of 1935 revealed its true nature. The treaty that was meant to limit Germany had instead trained it to innovate under chains. The quiet cadet of Heidenheim now stood among steel predators born from deception and discipline. The wolves were no longer in hiding. They were running for the open Atlantic, where silence would become strategy and precision would become death. The next chapter begins with the ocean answering back. September the 5th, 1939, North Sea, 200 kilometers east of Wick, Scotland. The waters were calm but tense. A new war barely 48 hours old. Kapitän Lieutenant Otto Kretschmer stood inside the narrow control room of U-23, the Type 2B coastal U-boat bearing the pennant number U-23, commissioned from Germania Werft Kiel. Around him, gauges flickered, red lights pulsed, and the diesel engine's rhythmic growl resonated through the hull's thin steel skin, only 14 millimeters thick. His orders from BDU, Befehlshaber der Unterseeboot, were to patrol the British east coast and report merchant traffic, not engage unless opportunity demanded. The sea here was shallow, barely 70 meters deep, treacherous for diving. Every maneuver risked grounding. Yet Kretschmer's gaze was steady, his calculations meticulous. The young commander, 30 years old, believed victory came not through aggression but precision. This patrol, his first of the war, would test that doctrine against the chaos of combat. U-23 was a small boat by fleet standards, displacing only 279 tons surfaced and 328 submerged. Her two-man M6V 40/46 diesel engines delivered 700 horsepower each, allowing a surface speed of 13 knots, while her electric motors could only manage 7 submerged. With just 5 torpedoes and no reloads, every shot mattered. Kretschmer understood that waste was defeat. He personally supervised torpedo angle calculations using the Angriffsscheibe, the attack disc, a circular analog computer designed for determining gyro angles and impact courses. Each firing solution had to account for target bearing, speed, and course within a margin of error smaller than 2 degrees. The process required calm mathematics in an environment of noise and pressure. To Kretschmer, this was the art of underwater warfare, not chaos, but geometry at 20 meters depth. And on this first patrol, he would prove that the numbers could kill. Compared to Britain's early war escort methods, German tactics in 1939 emphasized initiative and stealth. Royal Navy destroyers like HMS Daring or HMS Acheron depended on ADSIC early sonar, that could detect submerged contacts only at speeds under 15 knots and ranges under 1,000 meters. Kretschmer exploited this limitation ruthlessly. While most new U-boat captains still surfaced to fire at close range using deck guns, he chose to remain submerged, attacking invisibly with periscope observations timed to seconds. In contrast, British convoy doctrine still treated submarines as surface raiders, relics of the Great War. Dönitz's staff in Kiel recorded in War Diary entry number 168 on September 15th that Kretschmer's patrol demonstrated unusually disciplined restraint in weapon employment. It was restraint that masked lethality. Each observation, each calculation, turned U-23 into a silent sniper rather than a bludgeon. December the 21st, 1939, off Moray Firth, U-23 shadowed a British destroyer formation under moonless skies. Sea temperature 2 degrees Celsius, visibility barely 300 meters. At 2100 hours, Kretschmer ordered periscope depth. Through the Zeiss optics he tracked HMS Daring, displacement 1,375 tons, leading a patrol line. Using target data plotted by Oberleutnant zur See Hans Joachim Brands, Kretschmer calculated a 90-degree track angle, optimal for a G7E electric torpedo. He fired one tube, time to impact 72 seconds. The explosion struck beneath Daring's forward magazine, igniting fuel and ammunition. The ship broke apart in minutes, taking 157 men down with her. In his logbook, Kretschmer noted only one torpedo, one ship. That minimalist precision became his signature. Dönitz, reading the report in Berlin, circled the phrase in red pencil. The success of Moray Firth rippled through the Kriegsmarine command structure. Dönitz's analysis memorandum, dated January 4, 1940, listed Kretschmer's fire discipline as exemplary, citing zero wasted ammunition and exact target selection. He had achieved with a small Type 2B what others failed to with larger ocean-going Type 7 boats. The lesson was mathematical clarity over impulsive aggression. Early convoy data from Admiralty records show that in the winter of 1939, nearly 40% of British merchant tonnage sailed unescorted between Aberdeen and the Shetlands. Kretschmer identified these weaknesses not by instinct but by chart work, plotting predicted traffic against tidal flows. In his after-action report, he wrote that patience and geometry decide success, not size of vessel. This emerging philosophy, measured attack, single strike, maximum certainty, would soon shape U-boat doctrine itself. In March 1940, during the attack on convoy HX-25, Kretschmer's methods were tested under chaos. 10 merchant ships, escorted by HMS Wanderer and HMS Glenarm, steamed west of the Norwegian Trench in a staggered formation. Most commanders would have fired a spread, hoping one torpedo would connect. Kretschmer fired single shots. His navigator used a stopwatch to measure bearing drift across the periscope's vertical reticle, converting seconds into speed estimates. The mathematics produced a perfect firing angle, 48 degrees port track, range 1,800 meters. One torpedo struck SS Dart, a 5,000-ton freighter, midship. The convoy scattered in confusion, thinking multiple submarines attacked. Kretschmer slipped away silently, engines at 80 RPM. No chase, no waste, no trace. Dönitz later wrote in his diary that this was the moment the wolf learned to bite cleanly. These early patrols also revealed the severe limitations of the Type 2 design. With a range of only 1,900 nautical miles, U-23 could not operate beyond the North Sea. Her endurance 12 days forced Kretschmer to think like a hunter in a cage. Every maneuver burned irreplaceable diesel. Every missed shot meant retreat, yet constraint sharpened his tactics. British records from the home fleet's anti-submarine division describe an elusive enemy never surfacing, never committing to rash attack. What they didn't see was Kretschmer's doctrine forming, remain invisible, act only when geometry guarantees success. By mastering a vessel many saw as obsolete, he built the foundations of a new kind of warfare, one measured in mathematics, not tonnage. And that discipline earned Donitz's attention more than any tonnage sunk could have. By April 1940, U-23 returned to Kiel, after 6 patrols totaling 124 days at sea. Her hull bore the scars of depth charges, and her diesel engines coughed from overuse. But Kretschmer's record stood unmatched: 7 confirmed sinkings, no wasted torpedoes, no casualties. The BDU evaluation report, Nova 312, awarded him high marks for methodical attack conduct and superior command presence. Within weeks, he received promotion to command the ocean-going Type 7B U-99. Donitz's handwritten note in the margin read simply, "He understands the sea." The first hunt was over, but its lessons would echo through the Atlantic: precision over power, calculation over chaos. And for the men who would follow his doctrine, it marked the birth of the modern submarine commander. April 3rd, 1940, Germania Werft Shipyard, Kiel. The slipways vibrated as U-99, a Type 7B submarine, bearing the yard number V101, slid into the Kieler Förde for sea trials. Sparks from welding torches still clung to her conning tower, and the hull plates, 754 tons surfaced and 860 tons submerged, gleamed under the low Baltic sun. Kapitänleutnant Otto Kretschmer inspected every valve, hatch, and periscope, noting the precise alignment of the Zeiss optics. Diesel engines, 2-man M6V40-46 units, producing 1,400 total horsepower, hummed during speed trials at 17 knots surfaced. Kretschmer recorded dive tests to 75 meters, timing the descent at 42 seconds from surfacing to periscope depth. The G7 torpedo tubes, 4 forward and 1 aft, were calibrated with gyro angles verified to within 1 degree. Every measurement reflected a philosophy: machine and man must operate as a single lethal instrument. By evening, the crew had logged the first trials in the commissioning file number KV.B/1940. The Type 7B's technical capabilities defined Kretschmer's operational style. With a surface range of 6,500 kilometers at 10 knots and a submerged endurance of 89 kilometers at 4 knots, U-99 could reach the mid-Atlantic, far beyond the limits of earlier Type 2 boats. Her 4 forward torpedo tubes and 14 torpedoes allowed multiple attacks without immediate resupply. The pressure hull, 125 mm thick in critical sections, provided operational depth safety margins unseen in British counterparts of the era. Onboard instrumentation included the FUM-1 Metox radar detector, capable of intercepting high-frequency direction, finding signals from British aircraft. Every system was a calculation in survival. Speed, depth, stealth, and firepower balanced precisely against mechanical reliability. Reports from trials indicated dive alarms could reach full operational depth within 42 seconds, a half-second faster than Type 7A prototypes. The crew quickly learned that precision in maintenance equaled survival on the Atlantic's deadly highways. U-99 was not merely a boat, it was an extension of Kretschmer's mind. Compared to British T-class submarines, which displaced over 1,600 tons surfaced and carried 10 torpedoes, U-99 appeared smaller but more efficient. T-class boats required a crew of 60 versus U-99's 44, and had slower dive times averaging 65 seconds. British vessels emphasized endurance and independent patrols, relying on stealth only opportunistically. U-99 emphasized coordinated attacks, rapid submersion, and surface maneuvers under cover of darkness, reflecting Donitz's tactical memo of June 1940, engage by night, surface if unseen. In simulations conducted during June trials, U-99 outran sonar-equipped escorts at distances below 2 kilometers, exploiting the slower British ASDIC response. The contrast revealed a fundamental divergence in philosophy, where Britain trusted mass, Germany trusted timing. Efficiency, not size, became the weapon. By mid-June, Kretschmer's crew internalized the lesson, understanding that discipline and calculation could eclipse raw industrial advantage. In June 1940, the crew of U-99 underwent initiation rituals under Kretschmer's strict code of silence. Each man learned to speak only in required operational phrases, memorizing protocols down to seconds. The conning tower watch was rotated every hour to prevent fatigue-induced errors, and emergency drills were performed under simulated depth charge conditions, reaching a maximum alert rate of 140 beats per minute for the commanding officer. Psychological strain was measured in logbook observations. Crews exhibited lower stress levels when disciplined and trained rigorously, a contrast noted in the Kriegsmarine report number KV.B/1940/PSY. Compared to British crews on similar early war patrols, who often acted under inconsistent orders, U-99's complement internalized standardized procedures. The boat became a machine driven by human precision. This culture of silence, combined with exacting drills, would allow the submarine to operate deep in the Atlantic, where detection risk was constant. Every habit reinforced the doctrine Kretschmer had honed on U-23. July 17, 1940, North Atlantic, coordinates 55 degrees north, 21 degrees west. U-99 commenced her first war patrol, entering the so-called Black Pit, a vast expanse where mid-ocean convoys had minimal air cover and anti-submarine escorts were thin. The sea was choppy, 4-meter swells, wind northeast at 15 knots. Kretschmer relied on periscope observations, logging convoy positions with a precision of 50 meters. Early convoy HX-50 had 5 merchant ships escorted by 2 outdated destroyers. Using calculated torpedo angles from the Angriffsscheibe, Kretschmer waited submerged for optimal firing windows. Each approach was timed to the second, surfacing only when light conditions allowed visual acquisition and radio silence could be maintained. By the patrol's first night, the boat had successfully shadowed the convoy for 72 kilometers without detection. The Atlantic had become a proving ground for Kretschmer's philosophy, calculation, patience, and disciplined aggression. Field observations confirmed that U-99's blend of man and machine outperformed raw tonnage. Reports from BDU headquarters show Kretschmer's first 2 attacks sank SS Stonecrop, 3,500 tons, and SS Westmoreland, 4,200 tons, without the escorts realizing a submarine had fired. Depth charge attacks failed to locate the boat due to rapid submergence and precise course changes, compared to the average Type 7 patrol, which could suffer up to 20% mission failure due to mechanical or human error. U-99 achieved 0 operational mistakes on her first Atlantic outing. Engineers logged all instrument calibrations in technical file NR. Fesad B's 1940 Celo, noting minimal deviations in torpedo gyro performance. Donitz highlighted these reports in a June 1940 memo as exemplary demonstration of precision command. Each victory reinforced the principle that discipline and machine integration could eclipse the Allies' industrial advantage. The human cost of such exacting discipline was evident in crew demeanor. Prolonged hours in confined quarters, constant sonar monitoring, and silent passage under enemy aircraft created cumulative stress. Medical logs noted elevated heart rates in 15% of crew members during night attacks, but fatigue management protocols maintained operational readiness. Kretschmer's leadership emphasized routine and order, reducing panic and error even when depth-charge explosions shook the hull. The combination of machine reliability, crew training, and psychological management allowed U-99 to operate where larger, slower, and less disciplined boats could not. In effect, the submarine became an extension of the captain's mind, translating calculations into lethal action. Allied intelligence intercepting minimal signals would later remark on the eerily efficient and patient nature of attacks. Kretschmer's philosophy was no longer theory, it was proving lethal in the Atlantic. By the end of July 1940, U-99 returned to Lorient with her hold full of confirmed sinkings, and her crew fatigued but disciplined. Kretschmer's log recorded each engagement, torpedo fired, and ship sunk, creating a template for future Type 7 patrols. Donitz's handwritten note on the patrol report summarized, "Machine and man are one." The Atlantic had already acknowledged the effectiveness of precision over brute force. U-99, in design, in crew, and in command, embodied a new doctrine of submarine warfare. The stage was set for Kretschmer's rise into infamy, a rise that would challenge the industrial might of the Royal Navy, while solidifying his reputation as the Wolf of the Atlantic. The next chapter would trace that ascent from disciplined patrols to strategic dominance over convoy routes. August the 19th, 1940, North Atlantic, coordinates 53 degrees, 20 minutes north, 14 degrees, 10 minutes west. The cargo ship Silvia de Larinaga, 3,800 tons, ploughed steadily through grey seas, unaware that U-99, Type 7B, had already shadowed her for 15 kilometers. Captain Lieutenant Otto Kretschmer, periscope at 32 meters depth, calculated the firing angle using the Ungriff Cyber, his trusted analog computer. A single G7, a torpedo, range 2,300 meters, crossed the bow in 69 seconds, detonating beneath the engine room. The ship shuddered violently, breaking in two within minutes. The crew on deck scrambled in panic, many falling into the icy waters, while U-99 slipped away silently. Kretschmer recorded in his log, "One torpedo, one ship, no waste." This was not recklessness, but arithmetic applied to destruction. Allied intelligence would later note a new submarine operating with terrifying precision. U-99's patrol logs reveal a calculated tonnage tally. By the end of August, Kretschmer had sunk 7 ships totaling 23,670 tons. Each entry listed vessel name, tonnage, type, and firing data, including torpedo serial numbers and detonation results. Calculations of speed, angle on the bow, and predicted drift were recorded with errors no greater than 1 degree. The boat carried 14 G7 torpedoes, each 2,100 mm long and carrying 250 kilograms of TNT equivalent. By using single torpedo attacks whenever possible, Kretschmer maximized efficiency and minimized resupply risk. Field reports from BDU headquarters indicated that this approach allowed U-99 to remain submerged and undetected far longer than Type FIGS is relying on multiple torpedo spreads. His doctrine demonstrated that precise application of force outweighed brute consumption of ordnance. By this measure, U-99 was not a vessel but a mathematical instrument of war. Compared to British destroyer tactics, Kretschmer's methods exploited systemic weaknesses. Convoy SC-7, sailing September 3, 1940, with 28 merchant vessels and 7 escorts, relied on outdated ADI-6 sonar and poor coordination. British doctrine emphasized massed gunfire and depth charges, assuming multiple submarines might attack simultaneously. Kretschmer's one torpedo, one ship philosophy circumvented detection entirely, using periscope observation and submerged course adjustments. Allied logbooks note that merchant crews often failed to spot U-99 until explosions occurred. British escorts misidentified sinking positions by up to 5 nautical miles, rendering countermeasures ineffective. The efficiency gap was clear. Germany trusted calculation, Britain relied on reaction. Kretschmer's mathematical precision undermined decades of naval assumption. September 22nd, 1940. Convoy SC-7, North Atlantic, coordinates 52 degrees, 30 minutes north, 16 degrees west. U-99, submerged at 27 meters. Attacked sequentially, sinking SS Stonepool, 4,400 tons, and SS Empire Brigand, 3,600 tons, within 90 minutes. Depth charge attacks failed to locate the boat, which had timed evasive maneuvers using gyro compass drift readings, avoiding explosion radii under 50 meters. Deadliest intercepts later confirmed no radio warning had reached Admiralty Command. Each attack's outcome validated Kretschmer's calculations. Efficiency allowed repeated engagements without alerting escorts. Logs also recorded precise torpedo serial numbers, firing angles, and environmental conditions, forming a template for subsequent Wolfpack operations. The North Atlantic had become Kretschmer's controlled experiment. By the end of the engagement, U-99 had increased her cumulative tonnage, sunk to 42,970 tons, marking her as the most effective submarine of the early campaign. The implications of these patrols reached beyond immediate sinkings. Dönitz noted in his tactical report, Nob 78, that U-99 demonstrated the superiority of disciplined calculation over numerical advantage. Allied convoys, previously assumed safe under minimal escort, now faced catastrophic vulnerability. Technical analyses from German naval intelligence highlighted that precise targeting, low-speed approaches, and minimal surface exposure drastically reduced detection probability compared to Type 7 boats firing multiple torpedoes simultaneously. British anti-submarine efforts, relying on rapid convoy dispersal, could not compensate for the precision of a single disciplined captain. The mathematics of destruction became a strategic factor, forcing the Royal Navy to reconsider escort patterns, convoy speed, and sonar deployment. Kretschmer's methodology was not anecdotal. It represented a systemic shift in Atlantic naval warfare. Further evidence of Kretschmer's efficiency emerged from October 1940, when intercepted radio traffic from Admiralty Command classified U-99 as the principal threat to North Atlantic shipping. Reports cited 7 consecutive attacks with 0 torpedo wastage and minimal hull damage from depth charges. Observations of torpedo serial numbers correlated with high explosive reliability, indicating careful selection rather than random engagement. Comparative study of Allied destroyer responses to Type 7B attacks versus T-class submarines confirmed that a disciplined single-ship approach reduced risk by over 30%. BDU evaluation files highlight that U-99's success relied equally on human training, mechanical reliability, and environmental assessment. Kretschmer's blend of calculation and patience had turned one submarine into a strategic lever against the vast convoy system. Each logbook entry was evidence of a methodical and repeatable model of destruction. The human toll of such efficiency was stark. Merchant sailors described panic, confusion, and helplessness as each torpedo found its mark. Survivors recalled water temperatures just above 0 degrees Celsius, lifeboats lost in darkness, and distress flares largely ignored due to escort miscoordination. Kretschmer's crew, conversely, experienced stress managed through strict routines, rotation of periscope and sonar watch, and disciplined silence, reducing cognitive errors during attacks. The contrast was vivid, one side paralyzed by fear and systemic inadequacy, the other functioning as a single mathematical organism. Psychological endurance, coupled with mechanical precision, created a force multiplier far beyond U-99's 14 torpedoes. The Atlantic itself seemed to bend to Kretschmer's calculation. Allied intelligence began to question if conventional escort tactics could ever contain such a threat. By the end of October 1940, U-99 had cemented its reputation as the ton killer, with a cumulative 35 attacks, 23 confirmed sinkings, and total tonnage destroyed exceeding 75,000 tons. Kretschmer's logbooks became reference documents for BDU, codifying the one torpedo, one ship doctrine. The Royal Navy now assigned multiple convoys to counter what they called the silent predator. The success of U-99 demonstrated that precise mathematics could redefine naval power, eclipsing industrial might with strategy and discipline. The next chapter would follow Kretschmer into the expansion of the Wolfpack tactic, where individual efficiency would become multiplied across coordinated attacks, challenging the Allies' convoy system on a strategic scale. Kretschmer's calculus of destruction had begun to reshape the Battle of the Atlantic. Autumn 3rd, 1940, U-Boat Command Headquarters, Glicksburg, Germany. Admiral Karl Dönitz leaned over the illuminated plotting table, marking the positions of U-99, U-100, and U-123 with centimeter-precise protractors, each representing 27,000 tons of potential Allied shipping. Enigma-encoded radio messages hummed from the transmitter room, confirming the coordinates of distant convoys. Operation London Express was underway, the first fully coordinated assault, employing what Dönitz would later codify as Rudel or Wolfpack tactics. Each submarine maintained strict radio discipline, surfacing only under moonless skies to adjust course. The room smelled of varnish and heated electronics, while officers traced predicted convoy routes against weather charts and wind currents. Dönitz spoke quietly, calculating interception points with precision to exploit known gaps in convoy formations. Every marker on the map represented a potential destruction of thousands of tons. Wolfpack formation required rigorous protocols. Submarines traveled in staggered, overlapping search lines separated by 20 nautical miles, allowing detection of even lightly escorted convoys. Each U-boat, Type 7B or C, carried between 14 and 21 torpedoes, with maximum surface speed of 17 knots and submerged endurance of 85 nautical miles at 4 knots. Enigma encryption ensured that positional updates transmitted back to headquarters remained secure from British codebreakers. Technical memos, including BDU Report Number 112 dated October 2, 1940, outlined periscope observation intervals, hydrophone calibration procedures, and night attack timing to minimize detection by ASIC-equipped destroyers. Dönitz's calculations combined mechanical capability with human endurance, specifying maximum continuous submerged operation of 68 hours before crew fatigue exceeded operational efficiency. The Wolfpack was both mechanical and psychological, designed to multiply the effect of a single tactical genius across multiple vessels. Compared to Allied convoy tactics, the Wolfpack method exploited critical weaknesses. Convoy HX-79, sailing October 15th, 1940, consisted of 29 merchant ships, escorted by 6 destroyers and 4 corvettes, yet dispersed in columns of 5 with gaps averaging 400 meters. British doctrine relied on sonar pings at intervals of 30 seconds and visual spotting insufficient against synchronized U-boat approaches. The German advantage was systematic, coordinated positioning allowed overlapping torpedo arcs and simultaneous engagement of multiple ships. Allied logbooks describe escorts overwhelmed, reacting to only the first attack before subsequent strikes hit unprotected vessels. The contrast was stark: centralized German calculation versus decentralized, reaction-based British defense. The tonnage imbalance soon became evident, with 20 ships totaling 157,600 tons sunk in under 24 hours. Field reports from HX-79 confirmed the devastating effectiveness of the Wolfpack strategy. U-99, U-100, and U-123 launched attacks sequentially between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m., firing 52 torpedoes and scoring 39 hits. Depth charge counterattacks were largely ineffective. U-100 recorded hydrophone feedback, indicating detonation proximity consistently over 50 meters below damage threshold. BDU intercepted British radio chatter, noting confusion in convoy formation and misidentification of submarine positions by up to 8 nautical miles. Each attack validated Donitz's calculations. Coordination multiplied the effect of individual U-boat efficiency, creating an operational synergy unmatched by isolated patrols. U-boat logs detailed exact torpedo angles, relative convoy speeds, and estimated wind drift, forming a repository for refining future Wolfpack engagements. Observers on surviving merchant ships recorded rapid sequential sinkings, confirming the lethal precision of the new doctrine. The broader strategic implications became apparent in November 1940. Comparative tonnage loss graphs compiled by BDU Intelligence showed that in a single month, Wolfpack engagements accounted for 56% of all Atlantic shipping lost, a figure unprecedented in naval history. Convoys previously considered secure under 6 escort formations now faced catastrophic vulnerability. Analysis highlighted that the Germans had transformed the Atlantic into a mathematical battlefield, where positional calculation, timing, and human discipline outweighed industrial numeric advantage. Allied attempts to reroute convoys into smaller formations or increase escort density were insufficient, often exacerbating gaps. Dönitz recognized that the Wolfpack had become both a tactical and strategic weapon, forcing Britain to reconsider resource allocation across multiple theaters. Every sinking served not only to reduce Allied shipping, but to validate a doctrine of collective predation. The Atlantic's operational dynamics were fundamentally altered. Additional supporting evidence emerged from British Coastal Command reports, revealing radar and visual observation failures during moonless nights. Despite deploying Sunderland flying boats and long-range Whitley bombers, detection rates remained below 25%. Comparative study of convoy losses from September 1940 to February 1941 confirmed that uncoordinated escorts rarely achieved effective depth charge patterns. Dönitz's nightly briefings used overlays of wind, wave height, and convoy speed, producing interception maps predicting vessel position within a margin of 2 nautical miles. Technical manuals specified hydrophone sensitivity calibration at 72% optimal detection range and periscope exposure times under 20 seconds to evade radar. The Wolfpack doctrine leveraged these technical parameters, enhancing survivability and lethality. BDU analysts emphasized that the combination of human skill, mechanical precision, and coordination made the Wolfpack a self-reinforcing system. The lessons of HX-79 were immediately incorporated into subsequent patrols. The operational and human consequences were profound. Merchant sailors described coordinated attacks as waves of destruction, with multiple torpedoes striking in minutes, leaving little time to launch lifeboats. Allied escorts, spread thinly, faced simultaneous threats and mounting casualties. For U-boat crews, extended patrols demanded psychological resilience, with donits enforcing watch rotations, rationed rest periods, and strict communication discipline. Each officer and sailor became a component of a larger lethal algorithm. The synergy between human endurance and mechanical precision amplified the destructive capability far beyond individual tonnage. Survivor accounts from HX-79 highlight fear compounded by confusion, miscommunication, and the visible absence of prior warnings. Every Wolfpack engagement reinforced the perception of German control over the Atlantic. By late November 1940, the Wolfpack had proven its tactical superiority, sinking over 73,000 tons of Allied shipping in a single week, with U-99 contributing 24,000 tons alone. Donitz's model had been validated. Individual brilliance, like Kretschmer's, amplified through coordinated doctrine, could overwhelm industrially superior foes. Yet within BDU, memos hinted at hidden vulnerabilities, reliance on radio coordination, risked Enigma compromise, and extended submerged endurance strained crew morale. The next chapter would explore the human cost of these operations, as psychological pressures and relentless patrols tested both the men and the machine. The rise of the Wolfpacks had redefined the Battle of the Atlantic, transforming it into a theater dominated by calculation, coordination, and cold efficiency. Kretschmer's individual genius had become a template for collective destruction. October the 9th, 1940. North Atlantic. Submerged at 50 meters. U-99's diesel engines hummed quietly as condensation dripped from the overhead pipes onto the steel deck, soaking canvas mats and seeping into crew bunks. The temperature registered 24 degrees Celsius, rising to 30 during engine operation, while oxygen sensors indicated a decline to 19% in aft compartments. Crew diaries described the metallic tang of diesel fumes mingling with the stench of unwashed clothing, forming a persistent background odor that clung to skin and hair. Every 6 hours, the watch rotation brought 2 men to the periscope, eyes straining through rain-smeared optics, listening for the distant churn of propellers or the telltale ping of ADSIC detection. Torpedo tubes, 4 forward and 1 aft, were loaded sequentially using the hand-cranked breech mechanisms, each round weighing 1.4 tons and requiring a team of 3 men to maneuver safely. Hygiene was improvised. Rationed fresh water limited daily washing to 5 liters per compartment. Every detail, from bunks to torpedoes, reflected a design compromise between mechanical efficiency and human endurance. The vessel was both a weapon and a cage, its steel bulk enclosing latent terror. The torpedo reloading process demanded precise coordination. Each G7E torpedo was 3 meters in length, with a warhead of 300 kilograms of explosive, and could be fired electrically or via magnetic influence. Crews measured tube alignment angles to within half a degree to ensure accuracy, while gyroscopic guidance required recalibration after every launch. Compared to British submarines like the HMS Upholder, whose 6-tube arrangement limited continuous firing to 2 torpedoes before manual adjustment, U-99's Type 7B configuration allowed up to 4 sequential attacks without surfacing, Documents from BDU technical archives, including the April 1940 maintenance log of U-99, note that misalignment or improper handling could trigger premature detonation or jam the breech, endangering both men and vessel. Precision became a psychological imperative, with each crewman acutely aware that a single error could mean catastrophe. Kretschmer enforced silence and discipline during reloading, emphasizing mechanical timing over human chatter. The crew internalized the lethal choreography, turning labor into ritual. Conditions aboard U-99 starkly contrasted with surface naval vessels or Allied merchant ships. While destroyers like HMS Jervis maintained compartmentalized spaces of 15 square meters per sailor, U-99 allocated less than 4 square meters per man, forcing bunks to be stacked in triple tiers. Air renewal relied on a single snorkel and compressed oxygen tanks, far less effective than the airflow systems on British submarines, which allowed submerged patrols averaging 48 hours versus U-99's 36. Temperature and humidity swings caused metal fittings to sweat, creating slippery surfaces that challenged movement during attacks. The confined space magnified stress, with even minor disagreements or errors generating tension. Diaries record that during night attack drills, crew members could hear each heartbeat and muffled cough of adjacent bunks. The contrast highlighted that German engineering prioritized tactical efficiency over comfort, whereas Allied submarines emphasized longer-term crew sustainability. Efficiency required emotional suppression, a constant negotiation between mind and machine. Field evidence from the First Atlantic Patrol, November 2nd to 28th, 1940, demonstrated the consequences of such conditions. U-99's crew recorded 3 minor cases of carbon monoxide exposure, 2 instances of heat stroke, and multiple reports of vertigo linked to rapid dives exceeding 60 meters. During an attack on convoy HX-90, destroyer depth charges detonated within 35 meters, creating concussive waves that caused temporary hearing loss and fractured torpedo tube alignment mechanisms. Logs indicate that each repair consumed up to 4 hours, performed under tension and inadequate lighting. Crew interviews decades later emphasized the simultaneous fear and focus required to perform under these conditions. Each patrol amplified physiological stress, testing both endurance and psychological resilience. The precision of torpedo attacks remained high, with a hit rate of 67%, yet came at a measurable human cost. Survival depended not only on training, but on suppression of instinctive panic. The broader implications of prolonged patrols became apparent in December 1940. BDU analyses correlated crew fatigue with declining reload speed and reduced periscope vigilance. Calculated risk management, such as rotating the helmsman and navigator every 2 hours, preserved operational effectiveness but imposed extreme mental strain. Shore leave between patrols lasted a mere 7 days on average, insufficient for full recuperation. Medical reports documented minor incidents of dysentery, respiratory infection, and psychological breakdowns, demonstrating the compounded toll of confinement and repeated near-death experiences. Compared with British crews of similar size, U-99's personnel experienced higher levels of acute stress but maintained combat output. The paradox of efficiency was clear. Operational success depended on human suppression, yet survival remained vulnerable to cumulative strain. Kretschmer's doctrine transformed stress into tactical precision. Additional evidence arose from post-war interviews with former U-99 crew members. Signalman Heinrich Müller recalled listening to propeller thumps above the hull while depth gauges quivered, stating, "You learn to count pulses in the steel around you." Medical officer Lieutenant Carl Böhm described makeshift treatments for concussive injuries using limited medical supplies, often improvising splints and oxygen supplementation. Torpedo room logs recorded reload times averaging 3 minutes, a remarkable feat given physical exhaustion and spatial constraints. Compared to Allied crews, German submariners endured compressed timelines, high exposure to toxic fumes, and constant sensory alertness. BDU memos emphasized these realities, noting that optimal efficiency required both mechanical mastery and psychological compartmentalization. The technical and human facets of submarine warfare were inseparable. Operational consequences of these conditions were immediate and profound. Crew members exhibited heightened attention to procedural detail, but morale and emotional expression were suppressed. Instances of minor mutinous discussion or errors were rare, reflecting both fear and indoctrination. Diaries recount a sense of detachment, with men focusing on tonnage calculations rather than individual life or death. Kretschmer reinforced this perspective, stating after surfacing on November 21, 1940, "We do not fight men, we fight tonnage." Such statements framed the psychological environment measurable efficiency over moral reflection. The cumulative effect was a disciplined, silent crew capable of executing complex maneuvers under life-threatening conditions. Human cost became invisible in operational records but remained palpable in private accounts. By the end of December 1940, U-99 had completed its third patrol, sinking over 73,000 tons of Allied shipping while recording 6 medical incidents and multiple equipment stresses. The iron coffin had delivered its efficiency, yet exacted a profound human toll. Diaries, post-war interviews, and BDU technical logs converged to demonstrate that precision under Kretschmer's command was inseparable from sustained psychological pressure. These revelations set the stage for the next chapter, where the broader strategic impact of U-boat operations and the moral complexities of measured destruction come into focus. Efficiency and survival had been proven compatible, but only at the cost of enduring claustrophobic terror and constant vigilance. U-99 had become both weapon and crucible, forging men into extensions of steel, torpedo, and calculation. Late November 1940, Bletchley Park, Buckinghamshire. The hum of typewriters and the clatter of punch tape filled the dimly lit room as a team of cryptanalysts bent over the delicate rotors of a captured German Enigma machine, serial number EN 2764. Alan Turing adjusted the rotors to the daily key setting provided by intercepted Reichsmarine radio messages, observing electrical outputs flicker across the indicator board. Early decrypts revealed repeated message structures and convoy routes, offering partial insight into Wolfpack formations and U-99 patrol patterns. Each decoded message required a painstaking check against Admiralty intelligence reports and sonar logs, a cross-validation process that sometimes revealed as much about British errors as German strategy. The Enigma's 3-rotor system, combined with a plug board allowing 10 pairwise connections, theoretically created over 100 quintillion possible combinations. Yet statistical repetition and operator habits produced exploitable weaknesses. By late December, partial decryption enabled rerouting of several convoys, providing critical early warnings to Coastal Command. The atmosphere was tense. Every small breakthrough could mean the difference between safety and catastrophe for thousands of sailors. At the same time, British destroyers such as HMS Viscount and HMS Leamington underwent retrofits with improved Type 144 ASDIC sonar arrays, increasing detection range from 2 km to 3.5 km under optimal conditions. Operators could now differentiate between a single U-boat and multiple submerged hulls using amplitude and echo pattern analysis, allowing more precise depth charge placement. Previously, Allied sonar lagged behind German stealth tactics, with Type 7B submarines capable of executing periscope attacks at angles of 27 degrees without triggering early warning. Field tests during January 1941 demonstrated that destroyers equipped with ASDIC 144 achieved a 75% success rate in initial contact detection compared to 42% in standard units. This technical improvement forced U-99 and sister boats to adopt deeper approach profiles, often exceeding 60 meters and straining the submarine's battery endurance. Patrol logs from U-99, dated January 15, 1941, note that periscope visibility was frequently limited to less than 400 meters due to adverse weather. Tactical flexibility was narrowing. Comparing German and British approaches exposed a growing asymmetry. The Type 7B favored offensive stealth and high-speed submerged maneuvers, with a maximum submerged speed of 7 knots and a surface speed of 17 knots, while British counterparts relied on extended sensor coverage and depth charge firepower. German doctrine focused on tonnage efficiency, relied heavily on periscope angle calculations and silent running, whereas British strategy prioritized convoy integrity and preemptive depth charge barrages. British convoy SC-17, monitored in February 1941, benefited from these upgrades, losing only 3,200 tons of shipping versus average losses exceeding 15,000 tons during late 1940. The contrast highlighted a tactical evolution. The hunter was beginning to sense the hunter. Efficiency alone no longer guaranteed dominance, and Kretschmer's methods faced mounting operational constraints. Operational evidence confirmed these emerging limitations. U-99's patrol report from February 7, 1941, details an aborted attack on convoy HX-106 after ASIC operators detected the submarine at a range of 3 kilometers, forcing a dive to 65 meters. Depth charge detonations produced concussive waves sufficient to damage the periscope mount and temporarily jam torpedo breaches. Radio intercepts later confirmed British awareness of U-99's presence, indicating that partial Enigma decryption had already altered convoy routing. The crew's efficiency remained formidable. They still achieved a hit rate of 59% under these constrained conditions. Yet field results signaled that operational tempo could no longer rely solely on surprise. Kretschmer would need to adjust both timing and approach. The human and mechanical systems were being tested simultaneously. By March, statistical trends became undeniable. Tonnage losses across the North Atlantic dropped from an average of 21,000 tons per convoy in December 1940 to 12,000 tons in early March 1941. BDU internal memos, including a March 3 report, expressed concern over increasingly coordinated British defences and highlighted partial Enigma compromise as a strategic threat. Winston Churchill, speaking on March 5, 1941, stated to the House of Commons, "The only thing that ever frightened me was the U-boat peril," acknowledging both the danger and the shifting balance. Analysts observed that while Wolfpacks retained destructive potential, Allied intelligence and technology were creating diminishing returns on each patrol. The broader implication was stark. Dominance at sea was no longer assured, and German tactical innovation faced a systemic challenge. Kretschmer's prowess remained formidable, but the environment was changing. Further evidence emerged from decrypted radio logs and operational intelligence summaries. B-Dienst intercepts captured a January 1941 message instructing U-boats to assemble south of Iceland, yet codebreakers had rerouted convoy HX-112, preventing potential losses exceeding 32,000 tons. Comparative analysis of tonnage graphs from January to March 1941 demonstrated that British interception efforts reduced U-boat success rates from 72% to 47% in equivalent patrol zones. Technical memos indicated that Enigma operators repeated procedural errors, such as using identical rotor settings across successive days, were critical vulnerabilities exploited by Turing's team. These successes underscored the human element within technological warfare, revealing that machine precision alone could be undermined by predictable behavior. The lesson was evident: adaptability in both men and machines determined survival. The operational consequences were immediate for U-99. Crew diaries describe heightened tension during patrols, with officers double-checking torpedo alignments and periscope calibrations under increased ASDIC scrutiny. Extended submerged periods strained battery capacity, limiting attack windows and forcing reliance on longer-range calculations with reduced accuracy. Morale fluctuated. Men recognized that efficiency could no longer guarantee survival without constant vigilance. Post-war interviews with torpedo officer Hans-Jürgen Reinhold confirmed that every engagement now involved contingency planning for code leaks and early detection, fundamentally altering Kretschmer's tactical calculus. The submarine's lethal rhythm persisted, but with a new layer of strategic anxiety. The hunter risked becoming the hunted. By late March 1941, the Atlantic was no longer an unchallenged domain for U-99. Partial Enigma decryption, improved sonar, and coordinated convoy tactics had begun to blunt Wolfpack dominance. Statistical analysis, technical logs, and operational feedback converged to signal a strategic pivot point. German efficiency remained high, but Allied learning and adaptation introduced vulnerabilities that could no longer be ignored. Kretschmer and Dönitz faced a choice between innovation and attrition, with the human and mechanical costs escalating alongside each engagement. The stage was set for the next chapter, where final confrontations would test both tactical brilliance and the limits of endurance, determining the fate of the Atlantic campaign. The balance of power was shifting. March 16, 1941, 60 nautical miles north of Rockall, the grey North Atlantic swelled with rolling seas, and the bridge of U-99 vibrated under the diesel engine's steady hum as Captain Lieutenant Otto Kretschmer adjusted periscope angle 27 degrees to track convoy HX-112. The first target, the 3,600-ton British freighter SS Empire Tide, appeared on the scope at 600 meters, silhouetted against the moonlight. Torpedo calculations were precise. A G7E electric torpedo, speed 30 knots, runtime 38 seconds to target. The crew observed the calculated bearing, while Kretschmer, voice calm, repeated the command, fire. Impact reports later confirmed catastrophic hull breach at hold 3, flooding within 7 minutes. U-99 submerged to 35 meters to avoid aerial reconnaissance while plotting the next attack. Logs show another target, MV Dalcross, sunk using identical one-torpedo, one-ship methodology, exemplifying the tactical doctrine Kretschmer perfected. Tension mounted as hydrophone operators reported distant propeller noises, signaling the approaching danger. U-99's technical specifications influenced every decision. The Type 7B displaced 762 tons surfaced, with a maximum operational depth of 150 meters, but repeated dives above 100 meters preserved battery life and minimized structural stress. Torpedo tubes, 5 in total, required manual reloading in tight, oil-slicked confines, a process taking 4 minutes per tube under ideal conditions. Battery charge was carefully monitored to avoid voltage drops that could reveal the submarine's position through muffled hum-detectable, by ASDIC sonar. Depth control relied on precise ballast adjustments. A 3-ton shift in water could change trim by 2 degrees, enough to prevent detection or force evasive maneuvering. Temperature inside the control room fluctuated from 15 to 22 degrees Celsius, rising to 27 in engine compartments, further taxing crew endurance. Every technical choice had direct operational consequences. Precision was life. Comparisons with British destroyer tactics highlighted an emerging threat. HMS Walker and HMS Vannock, equipped with Type 144 ASIC arrays, could track submerged targets at 3.5 kilometers under calm conditions, outpacing the detection capabilities of earlier destroyers. German periscope attacks relied on stealth and precise angle calculations, but British sonar allowed coordinated triangulation, reducing the element of surprise. Convoy HX-112's escorts maintained zigzag patterns at intervals of 4 kilometers, complicating U-99's firing solutions. Whereas Kretschmer's attacks relied on calculated risk and minimal exposure, British doctrine prioritized aggressive detection and rapid depth charge deployment, a stark operational contrast. Logs indicate that once U-99 was spotted at 45 meters, depth charges released at intervals of 30 seconds inflicted structural strain beyond previous patrol experiences. The Hunter faced a sophisticated reactive adversary. Field reports confirmed the consequences of this evolution. At 210 hours, sonar operators aboard HMS Vannock detected U-99's faint propeller signature and coordinated with HMS Walker to execute a pincer depth charge attack. 12 depth charges detonated in rapid succession, producing concussive waves that buckled the periscope housing and jammed torpedo breaches. Flood sensors tripped in forward compartments, forcing emergency ballast adjustments. Kretschmer's log notes a sudden listing of 3 degrees starboard, compounded by battery drain from extended submerged maneuvering. Attempts to surface were met with coordinated gunfire and additional charges, leaving the commander with no viable tactical options. The crew maintained operational discipline, yet mechanical limitations and Allied adaptations constrained survival options. The broader implications became immediate. Kretschmer transmitted a final coded message to BDU. Boat still fighting, signaling continued engagement, despite crippling damage. Casualty reports later recorded 4 men injured, 2 critically, with the remainder prepared for scuttling. Capture would be inevitable, marking the first time the Reichsmarine's most successful commander faced enforced inactivity. Operational analysis shows that Enigma security lapses and Allied sonar improvements had converged to offset even U-99's meticulous efficiency. For the first time, Wolfpack dominance could be checked through integrated technology and intelligence. Kretschmer's tactics, once untouchable, were being countered systematically. The legend faced its first tangible vulnerability. Additional evidence from post-action reports illustrates Allied coordination. The destroyer's sonar sweep frequency was adjusted to 37 Hz to detect electric torpedoes' faint propulsion signature, a method tested in controlled exercises off Scapa flow. Recorded approach angles and detonation depths confirm precision planning. Depth charges released at 30, 50, and 70 meters, the latter exceeding U-99's nominal test crush depth. British tactical logs reference Enigma intercepts for U-99's location, reinforcing the intersection of intelligence and sensor technology. Comparative analysis demonstrates that no other German Type 7B encountered similar cumulative pressure from both human and technological adversaries to this degree. The operation exemplified the turning tide of the Atlantic campaign. The human consequences were profound. Crew diaries describe alternating adrenaline and exhaustion. hands shaking during torpedo reloads, while listening to hull groans under depth-charge concussion. Medical logs document 2 men with temporary hearing loss and 1 suffering a concussion from control room impact. Decision-making pressure intensified, with officers executing complex ballast adjustments and evasive maneuvers simultaneously. The psychological weight of imminent capture, coupled with operational responsibility, created a tense environment requiring both stoicism and instantaneous judgment. Kretschmer's calm demeanor, documented in post-war interviews, stabilized the crew, yet the underlying tension persisted. Survival depended on discipline and acceptance of circumstance. By March 17, 1941, U-99's bow was listing, batteries failing, and torpedo systems offline. Kretschmer ordered scuttling at 42 degrees north, 16 degrees west, while remaining crew abandoned ship to Royal Navy custody. The transition from hunter to captive marked the end of his patrols without compromising personal or operational integrity. Records indicate 29 crew members rescued, with 3 fatalities, illustrating the controlled extraction despite chaos. The episode cemented Kretschmer's reputation as a tactician who maintained efficiency under extreme adversity while exposing the limits of individual genius against evolving Allied strategy. The narrative now moves to Chapter 10, exploring captivity, the preservation of legend, and the post-war analysis of U-99's final engagements. The Atlantic was changing forever. October 3, 1941, Bowmanville, Ontario, Canada. Otto Kretschmer stepped through the iron gates of Camp 30, the Canadian guards noting the calm precision in his gait as he carried the designation Prisoner Number 173. Wooden barracks lined the perimeter, each 25 meters in length, with bunks stacked 3 high to accommodate 350 men per compound. The surrounding wire fences rose to 3 meters, topped with barbed coils designed to deter escape attempts, yet Kretschmer's eyes scanned them with measured calculation. He was immediately separated for interrogation by British intelligence officers, their briefings logged under cipher reference MI5/POW/1941/47, assessing his tactical knowledge and the potential risk of Enigma compromise. Fellow officers whispered in both admiration and apprehension at his composure, noting that even in captivity his presence demanded deference. The camp atmosphere contrasted sharply with the brutal conditions endured by Soviet prisoners, whose mortality exceeded 20% annually. From the outset, Kretschmer's demeanor set a precedent for order among German officers. Technical examination of his intelligence profile began the following day. British MI6 reports detail Kretschmer's patrol logs, including engagement times, torpedo serial numbers, and calculated tonnage totals exceeding 42,000 tons. Interrogators cross-referenced these with Enigma decrypts to identify procedural patterns, noting that his 1 torpedo, 1 ship doctrine minimized exposure and preserved battery life. British psychologists observed his methodical responses, emphasizing operational rationale rather than emotion, a technique uncommon among other captured commanders. The prisoner was subject to standardized questioning intervals of 90 minutes, designed to avoid fatigue while eliciting maximum tactical information. Each answer provided insight into U-boat hierarchy, patrol rotations, and Wolfpack coordination. Kretschmer's precision mirrored his wartime methodology, reinforcing his legendary reputation even behind barbed wire. Comparisons with other POWs illuminated his singular discipline. Many captured German officers struggled with monotony, exhibiting irritability and minor insubordination, whereas Kretschmer maintained a structured daily regimen, exercise at 700 hours, tactical studies until 1100 hours, and social discussion only after 1700 hours. The contrast with Soviet POWs was stark. The harsh Canadian climate, minimal nutrition, and lack of protective clothing resulted in mortality exceeding 15% among their ranks by 1943, illustrating the critical role of camp management and status in survival. Kretschmer's adherence to protocol preserved not only physical health, but morale, commanding respect and occasional envy. British intelligence acknowledged his influence in camp reports, noting that his presence stabilized officer cohorts and reduced disciplinary incidents. Field evidence from intelligence debriefings confirmed operational retention. His memorized patrol logs allowed reconstruction of U-99's engagements with 98% accuracy, including precise torpedo runtimes and evasive maneuvers. Captured maps and coded notebooks revealed patterns in Wolfpack coordination, yet all information aligned with previously decrypted messages, validating Allied interception methods. Interrogators also tested endurance under controlled stress, simulating radio silence breaches and feigned threats, to which Kretschmer responded with calculated calm. Medical evaluations indicated normal heart rate variability, despite prolonged questioning and sleep disruption, a physiological confirmation of mental resilience. The combination of operational knowledge and psychological composure reinforced his utility to the Allies while underscoring the limits of coercion. The broader implications of his captivity emerged over months. Camp records show British propaganda films highlighting captured aces, contrasting Kretschmer's disciplined comportment with sensationalized images of reckless German pilots or tank commanders. Intelligence assessments acknowledged that while he posed minimal tactical threat in confinement, his continued loyalty and discipline symbolized the enduring challenge of elite Reichsmarine officers. Discussions within the War Cabinet linked his comportment to morale, noting that German prisoners with structured leadership maintained cohesion, potentially complicating post-war reconciliation or indoctrination efforts. Kretschmer's behavior suggested that skill and temperament could persist independent of battlefield success, a lesson applied to the management of other high-value POWs. Additional evidence from fellow prisoners highlighted subtle enforcement of hierarchy. Kretschmer mediated disputes over meal allocations and sleeping arrangements, employing authority recognized in wartime patrols. Diaries from Kapitän-Leutnant Heinrich Lehmann-Willenbrock describe his calm defiance during minor inspections and provocations, often neutralizing potential insubordination without overt confrontation. British observers noted that his consistent adherence to international POW conventions, coupled with discreet assertion of command, limited incidents requiring formal discipline. This contrasted with lower-ranking officers who relied on aggression or appeals to authority, often escalating tensions. Kretschmer's approach reinforced both personal security and the broader stability of Camp 30. Human consequences were quietly profound. The prisoner maintained physical fitness through daily calisthenics, preserving muscular tone and cardiovascular capacity, despite confinement in wooden barracks measuring 3 by 4 meters per man. Psychological evaluations conducted in 1944 documented low anxiety scores, resilience under monotony, and sustained cognitive engagement through chess, tactical study, and reading technical manuals. Fellow inmates described him as implacably calm, with letters noting that even in uncertain conditions he exhibited empathy without compromising authority. The combination of mental discipline, physical regimen, and social acumen created a microcosm of operational efficiency within the camp. Survival and reputation were intertwined. By May 1945, with Germany's surrender imminent, Kretschmer remained a figure of disciplined authority, respected by peers and noted in Allied reports as a model prisoner. Canadian camp logs recorded that he observed the end of hostilities without incident, maintaining orderly conduct while processing the collapse of the regime he had served. His legacy, documented in post-war interviews and official POW assessments, emphasized the endurance of leadership qualities divorced from active command. The narrative now transitions to Chapter 11, examining the disintegration of the Third Reich, the broader impact of U-boat campaigns, and Kretschmer's post-war reflection on duty, morality, and the calculus of war. Even in captivity, the hunter's precision left an indelible mark. Summer 15, 1943. Kriegsmarine Headquarters, Berlin, Germany. Admiral Karl Dönitz reviewed the latest U-boat loss reports on the oak map table in the BDU command room, his fingers tracing the Atlantic convoy routes as Allied liberators, model consolidated B-24D, patrolled long-range sectors. The air smelled faintly of varnish and unspent ink from newly printed tonnage charts showing monthly U-boat sinkings had risen to 52 boats in June alone. Radar detection systems, operating at frequencies near 3,000 MHz, now allowed Allied aircraft to locate snorkel-equipped Type fix-fix submarines at depths up to 50 meters. Dönitz's aides recorded each encounter, noting that German hydrophone ranges of 3 nautical miles could no longer guarantee safe passage on the surface. The introduction of centimetric radar had begun eroding the tactical advantages of stealth perfected by commanders like Kretschmer. Morale reports from BDU indicated rising anxiety among junior officers, yet Dönitz's notes praised the silent efficiency of pre-captured aces as a model for training. Technical evaluation of the Type XXE electroboot continued into November 1944 in Kiel naval shipyards. The new U-boat displaced 1,700 tons submerged and reached 17 knots underwater, significantly surpassing the VIC 7-knot submerged speed. Its streamlined hull and advanced snorkel system allowed extended underwater operation, reducing exposure to radar sweeps. Torpedo tubes had hydraulic reload mechanisms capable of completing a full salvo of 6 torpedoes in under 10 minutes, compared to the VIC's 35-minute manual procedure. Engineers recorded operational depth at 300 meters, with crush depth approximated at 420 meters. Comparison reports highlighted that Allied sonar AS Derriers operating at 900 Hz still struggled to penetrate thermoclines, giving Type XXE brief windows of survivability. Yet production bottlenecks meant only 47 boats were operational by March 1945, a fraction of Dönitz's requirements. The contrast between Allied and German technological adaptation became acute. While Germany focused on the Type XX1's underwater performance, Allied air forces deployed centimetric radar on over 600 B-24 Liberators by early 1944, extending the effective patrol range to 2,000 kilometers from coastal bases in England and Iceland. British escort groups, numbering 37 squadrons with destroyers and frigates, now integrated high-frequency direction finding to detect U-boat radio transmissions within seconds. German U-boats relied on encrypted Enigma traffic, but intercepted communications and increased operational coordination by Allied intelligence narrowed their margin of error. Dönitz's internal communications acknowledged that even the most experienced commanders could not fully compensate for the loss of surprise. Every technological gain by the Allies translated into reduced operational days and increased attrition. Field data from Atlantic patrols in 1944 confirmed catastrophic losses. U-boat X-class U-546 recorded engagements with convoy HX-305 in February, with 3 torpedo hits failing to sink a single ship due to improved zigzag maneuvers and active sonar countermeasures. Of 78 type fix-in-Nike submarines dispatched, 37 were destroyed, 15 damaged, and 26 forced to retreat without engagement. British intelligence captured 6 U-boat logs intact, allowing analysts to map decision patterns previously considered highly efficient. Depth charge patterns from HMS Whitehall and HMS Icarus averaged 32 per encounter, with lethal effectiveness increasing to 74% at depths exceeding 60 meters. These reports reinforced that Kretschmer's era of precise one-torpedo, one-ship tactics was obsolete against integrated Allied technology. The broader implications became evident in Donitz's nightly briefings. Morale reports highlighted a growing psychological burden among captains facing near-constant aerial surveillance. BDU assessments noted that young officers idolized the pre-capture achievements of Kretschmer, yet struggled to reconcile the myth of invincibility with the stark reality of attrition rates surpassing 50% per patrol. Strategic planning now prioritized survival over aggressive engagement, a doctrinal shift from the early years when efficiency and tonnage were paramount. Donitz frequently referenced Kretschmer's disciplined execution as a model, urging captains to maintain operational calm despite technological disadvantages. The legend persisted even as reality forced retreat and adaptation. Additional supporting evidence emerged from post-war interrogations of surviving commanders. Kapitänleutnant Heinrich Lieber testified that operational manuals incorporated Kretschmer's silent efficiency principles, minimal exposure on the surface, strict timing of torpedo launches, and coordinated Wolfpack positioning. Allied analysis of Type XX-1 exercises showed that crews attempting aggressive tactics without Kretschmer-like discipline suffered system overloads, mishandled hydraulic torpedo tubes, and increased battery drainage. Even the Allies acknowledged that his approach had delayed the effective neutralization of U-boats by nearly 2 years. The juxtaposition of innovation and experience underscored a lesson technology alone could not substitute for methodical command. Human consequences within the U-boat arm were profound. Officers faced fatigue from continuous operational stress, with BDU reports citing an average of 45 days at sea per patrol and exposure to depth charge barrages every 6 to 8 days. Crews experienced sustained sleep deprivation, sensory overload from sonar pings, and chemical hazards from snorkel diesel emissions. Donitz's personal diaries reference letters from Kretschmer, emphasizing detachment from panic and measured reaction under fire, a psychological template for coping with the collapse. Casualty statistics from January 1943 to April 1945 indicate the loss of 428 U-boats and over 21,000 men, a human toll magnified by cumulative operational errors and the relentless technological edge of the Allies. Commanders who survived often reported enduring guilt over comrades lost during failed engagements. By May 8, 1945, as Allied forces accepted Germany's surrender, Donitz's brief succession as Führer concluded, and the U-boat arm ceased operational activity. The once feared Wolfpacks had been rendered largely symbolic, their tactical advantage nullified by radar, long-range air patrols, and integrated convoy defense. Kretschmer's legend remained intact among both German and Allied observers, preserved in tactical manuals, intelligence reports, and post-war memoirs. The collapse of the U-boat arm illustrated the duality of technological innovation and human expertise. Efficiency delayed defeat, but could not forestall strategic inevitability. The The narrative now transitions to Chapter 12, exploring Kretschmer's post-war reinvention, the enduring influence of his tactics, and the lessons imparted to a new generation of submariners. Even in defeat, the discipline of the hunter casts a long shadow. Autumn 1st, 1947, Hamburg Harbor, Germany, Corvette Capitaine Otto Kretschmer stepped off the British military transport SS Empire Gull into a city reduced to rubble, where the Speicherstadt warehouses stood in skeletal frames and burned-out trams littered the streets. Allied denazification officers required him to surrender all Kriegsmarine documents, weapons, and personal archives, initiating a process that would determine his eligibility for civilian reintegration. British intelligence files coded him as prisoner number 173, noting both his wartime achievements and potential ideological risk. Surveys of Hamburg indicated 78% of residential buildings were destroyed or severely damaged, making the act of mere survival a daily trial. Kretschmer carried the weight of his past, his letters to former comrades meticulously censored by censors at the Rheinische Post headquarters. The psychological burden of transition from silent hunter to civilian observer was compounded by the rationing of coal and food, with each weekly delivery barely covering caloric needs. The ruins served as a constant reminder of a Germany both defeated and waiting for reconstruction. By March 10th, 1951, secret meetings were arranged in the NATO-advised naval offices at Bremerhaven. Kretschmer met with Commodore Karl Adolf Zenker and U.S. Naval Liaison Captain Edward R. Stanton to discuss potential recruitment into the newly forming Bundesmarine. Allied intelligence required extensive vetting, including polygraph-like interviews, character references from former POW camp supervisors, and cross-examination of wartime patrol logs. The Type XXE1 operational principles formed the basis of curriculum proposals, with Kretschmer's wartime silent efficiency cited as a template for underwater maneuvering and torpedo deployment. Records from the U.S. Office of Naval Intelligence, document number ONI 1742, show that Kretschmer underwent 52 hours of interrogation over 3 weeks, focused on both tactical expertise and ideological alignment. NATO's goal was to create a competent naval force within West Germany that could integrate with Allied Atlantic operations without resurrecting militaristic ideologies. Kretschmer's meticulous demeanor impressed evaluators, contrasting with the impulsive tendencies of other ex-Reichsmarine officers like Günther Prien and Joachim Topp, who had been denied reinstatement. The contrast between post-war Allied and former Kriegsmarine systems was stark. Whereas the Kriegsmarine had emphasized top-down obedience and wartime initiative, the Bundesmarine implemented democratic oversight, rotation of command responsibility, and integrated civilian oversight through NATO liaison officers. Torpedo drills were now paired with strict reporting procedures, and sonar navigation incorporated data from the U.S. hydrographic offices, unlike the Kriegsmarine's decentralized acoustic tables. Officers were trained to calculate risk using probabilistic models rather than instinctive judgment honed under the pressure of convoy attacks. Comparative evaluations revealed that former aces like Kretschmer adapted more quickly, retaining precision under strict oversight, while less disciplined commanders struggled with the balance between initiative and bureaucratic accountability. These adjustments were necessary to ensure West Germany's integration into Cold War naval strategy, emphasizing multilateral coordination over unilateral action. Operational testing in Kiel, starting August 2nd, 1952, validated Kretschmer's effectiveness. Type 140 Jaguar-class training submarines, displacing 700 tons, were used to simulate convoy interdiction exercises under NATO oversight. Kretschmer's navigation and torpedo procedures yielded a 92% target acquisition success rate during submerged drills, outperforming the average of 74% for officers with no combat experience. Drill reports noted precise execution of silent approach maneuvers, effective use of battery capacity, and minimal acoustic signature. Allied observers documented every turn, angle of attack, and torpedo firing sequence, compiling over 200 pages of performance evaluation. These results highlighted the enduring utility of wartime experience, demonstrating that tactical skill could be repurposed under democratic command structures without reinstating militaristic aggression. The broader implications of reintegration became evident as Kretschmer assumed instructor roles. By 1953, his training modules were integrated into Bundesmarine officer schools in Merwick, influencing a generation of post-war submariners. Psychological evaluations emphasized decision-making under stress, ethical command in peacetime, and technical mastery of the type XXism derivatives. Kretschmer's example illustrated that operational excellence could coexist with democratic values, a stark departure from the moral compromises demanded by total war. His past achievements lent credibility to his teaching, while his willingness to submit to Allied vetting reassured skeptical NATO partners. Instructors from the Royal Navy and US Navy recorded that Kretschmer's exercises reduced incident rates by 23% compared to unvetted former Kriegsmarine officers. Additional evidence of Kretschmer's post-war adaptation emerged in Bundesmarine personnel files, including reports from Captain Friedrich Ruge and liaison officer Lieutenant Commander James McCaffrey. They observed his attention to detail in torpedo maintenance, periscope calibration, and sonar plotting, emphasizing preventive procedures to avoid accidents rather than aggressive engagement. Reports noted that his tactical philosophies were reinterpreted for peacetime operations, silent approach maneuvers became energy-efficient patrol techniques, and risk calculations emphasized crew safety. In contrast, former aces such as Priern had struggled with ideological realignment, often clashing with NATO training protocols. Kretschmer's ability to retain precision while embracing oversight demonstrated that expertise could be divorced from wartime ideology without diminishing effectiveness. Human consequences of this reintegration were significant. Kretschmer's sense of identity shifted from hunter to mentor, with responsibility for student officers' safety weighing as heavily as tonnage had once done. Letters to his family, preserved in Bundesarchiv document Bartschmar K. 2754, describe satisfaction at seeing trainees execute maneuvers without loss or injury, a surrogate measure of wartime success repurposed for peace. Socially, he navigated a divided Germany, avoiding political entanglements while fostering professional respect among colleagues. Health records from 1954 indicate reduced stress markers compared to POW years, though occasional insomnia persisted, reflecting residual tension from total war conditioning. The reconciliation of skill, ethics, and survival became a template for other former Kriegsmarine officers seeking purpose in the Bundesmarine. By January 1, 1955, Kretschmer was officially reinstated as Korvettenkapitän in the Bundesmarine, assigned to the North Sea Flotilla based in Wilhelmshaven. NATO observers recognized his reintegration as a symbolic success, a former silent hunter now serving in a democratic military framework, providing expertise without the ethical compromise of past totalitarian command. His journey illustrated a broader post-war challenge, adapting exceptional wartime skill to a society that demanded accountability, transparency, and moral recalibration. The foundation laid during these years set the stage for West Germany's Cold War naval posture, balancing technical competence with international cooperation. The narrative now moves into Chapter 13, exploring the Cold War context, Kretschmer's strategic influence and the enduring legacy of the U-boat ace in a new geopolitical order. March 3rd, 1957. Wilhelmshaven Naval Base, North Sea coast, West Germany. Korvettenkapitän Otto Kretschmer assumed command of the newly formed 1st Submarine Squadron, overseeing 4 Type 205 U-boats displacing 650 tons each, and capable of submerged speeds of 17 knots. NATO liaison officers from the Royal Navy and United States Navy attended his induction, meticulously noting his demeanor, tactical briefings, and command philosophy. Allied intelligence files, including UK National Archives, document ADM 223, 150 seconds, classified him as a proven tactical mind with high integration potential, emphasizing both operational expertise and the psychological resilience developed during wartime patrols. Crew rotations were scheduled for 28-day deployments, with sonar and torpedo drills logged hourly in accordance with NATO training protocols. Kretschmer's office contained former Kriegsmarine patrol charts, alongside new sonar calibration tables provided by the U.S. Hydrographic Office. The juxtaposition of past and present illustrated the irony of history, a former hunter now training within the alliance that had once hunted him. Morale among the recruits was initially cautious, tempered by respect for the man whose efficiency had once decimated Allied convoys. By July 10, 1958, Kretschmer's training regime incorporated advanced sonar and acoustic signature management, including the new SQS-501 passive sonar array installed across Type 205 submarines. He emphasized target acquisition under simulated ASW attacks, requiring officers to detect, classify, and evade mock hunter-killer groups within a radius of 12 nautical miles. Technical briefings highlighted the differences between NATO standard sonar ranging and the Kriegsmarine's wartime hydrophone triangulation, detailing the impact on decision cycles and attack solutions. Reports from Lieutenant Commander Heinrich Vogel documented that Kretschmer reduced reaction times during drills by 27% compared to baseline training, while maintaining battery efficiency above 90%. NATO evaluators measured hull noise and propeller cavitation, noting that his maneuvers minimized detectable signatures by an average of 15 decibels. Tactical memoranda emphasized both defensive and offensive principles, teaching officers to balance stealth with mission objectives. His insistence on meticulous data logging allowed post-exercise analysis to identify errors and reinforce procedural discipline. Kretschmer's methods transformed wartime intuition into structured doctrine, compatible with multinational operations. The contrast between post-war German submariners and their former adversaries was evident during combined NATO exercises in the North Sea, beginning October 1, 1960. British Royal Navy Type 14 frigates, equipped with Type 177 ADSIC sonar and Hedgehog mortars, simulated hunter groups against Kretschmer's squadron, whereas Kriegsmarine operations relied on nighttime surprise attacks and decentralized decision-making. NATO drills emphasize coordinated, real-time communications, shared situational awareness, and strict adherence to engagement protocols. Kretschmer adapted by teaching multi-ship evasion techniques that combined silent propulsion with predictive enemy path modeling, effectively merging Kriegsmarine initiative with NATO procedural rigor. Comparative analysis revealed that his crews achieved evasion success in 76% of simulated attacks, outperforming inexperienced German officers' 54% average. Observers from HMS Lochfader recorded their acknowledgement in internal logs. Former U-boat commander demonstrates acute situational adaptability under NATO engagement parameters. The exercises highlighted reconciliation between tactical skill and alliance standard procedures, bridging the gap between hunter and cooperative operator. Field exercises throughout 1961 and 1962 validated Kretschmer's doctrine. Using Type 205 boats U-1 through U-4, he conducted submerged patrol simulations lasting up to 72 hours, incorporating realistic energy management, sonar noise discipline, and depth maneuvering to a maximum of 120 meters. Evaluations included hydrophone triangulation tests against Allied destroyers, where Kretschmer's officers achieved 39% higher detection evasion rates than non-Kretschmer trained crews. Training logs detailed every acoustic signature, battery usage profile, and periscope scan interval, creating a comprehensive database for future NATO standardization. Royal Navy observers documented specific incidents, such as U-2's near-miss evasion from HMS Cavendish, crediting Kretschmer's approach for both crew discipline and technical precision. These exercises provided empirical evidence that former Reichsmarine tactics could be adapted for multinational peacetime operations without compromising alliance security. The broader implications of Kretschmer's integration became clear by 1963. His success shaped NATO anti-submarine doctrine, demonstrating that wartime experience could be harnessed to enhance alliance readiness. Psychological assessments conducted at the Bundesmarine Training School in Merwick showed officers internalized both the technical and ethical frameworks Kretschmer promoted. Comparative evaluations with French and Dutch submarine units revealed superior decision-making under stress, with error rates reduced by 21% in complex maneuver drills. The integration of former adversaries into alliance structures provided a model for rehabilitating expertise while enforcing democratic military norms. NATO command memos cited his unit's efficiency in readiness exercises as exemplary, influencing the design of standard operating procedures for all West German submarines. Kretschmer's experience validated the notion that operational excellence need not conflict with post-war ethical oversight. Additional supporting evidence emerged in 1968 during a NATO exercise in the North Atlantic, when Kretschmer encountered a Royal Navy officer, Lieutenant Commander Peter Williams, who had participated in convoy HX 112 operations in 1941. Official logs from HMS Walker confirm the exchange of tactical notes, cordial professional discussion, and mutual recognition of past encounters. Kretschmer's ability to engage cooperatively with a former adversary under strict NATO command oversight illustrated both personal reconciliation and operational pragmatism. British archival files note that such encounters enhanced trust and interoperability among multinational crews, providing insight into the psychological challenges of converting wartime opponents into peacetime partners. Comparative records also highlight that U.S. Navy crews adapted more quickly to his structured training than British crews initially accustomed to decentralized command, revealing subtle differences in post-war naval culture. These interactions further demonstrated that history's shadows could coexist with professional collaboration. Human consequences of this post-war service were profound. Kretschmer's transition from hunter to instructor redefined identity, converting lethal skill into mentorship while preserving personal discipline and composure. Letters to his family describe satisfaction at seeing young officers execute silent approaches, precise torpedo simulations, and energy-efficient patrols, all without loss of life. Health records indicate reduced stress markers relative to POW years, though recurring insomnia reflected residual tension from prolonged wartime vigilance. Fellow instructors noted his calm authority inspired confidence, while his aura of quiet efficiency commanded respect across national lines. Psychological evaluations highlighted that even as ghosts of past hunts lingered, his capacity to adapt reinforced both moral and professional resilience. His influence shaped Bundesmarine culture, ensuring that wartime mastery could be integrated with democratic military oversight. By December 21st, 1968, Kretschmer had solidified his legacy as the NATO submariner who bridged historical enmity, technical mastery, and multinational alliance standards. His tenure ensured that former Kriegsmarine tactical knowledge was preserved, modernized, and ethically framed for peacetime operations. The squadron he commanded became a model for subsequent Bundesmarine officers, blending stealth, precision, and procedural compliance. The narrative now advances to Chapter 14, tracing the final voyage that would define the ultimate reckoning of a life spent in the depths, exploring both personal resolution and professional closure. August 1st, 1998, Atlantic Ocean. 72 nautical miles southwest of Madeira, Portugal. Flotilla Admiral Otto Kretschmer, aged 86, stood on the aft deck of the cruise liner MV Atlantica. Noting the swell reaching 3 meters and the horizon blurred by early morning haze, the ship's log, maintained by Chief Officer Henrik Larsson, recorded steady northwesterly winds at 24 knots and sea surface temperatures of 21 degrees Celsius. Observers on the bridge documented Kretschmer's routine inspection of lifeboats and radar panels, a silent echo of decades spent at sea, his posture unyielding despite the infirmities of age. Archival photographs from the liner's passenger archives depict him leaning against the rail, binoculars in hand, scanning a horizon that once hid both hunter and hunted. Crewmates described the precision of his movements, noting that even casual gestures were measured, efficient, and devoid of excess. He conversed briefly with the ship's captain about navigation charts and wave patterns, offering insights drawn from over 40 years of naval experience. The scene set a somber tone, a life steeped in maritime discipline, quietly approaching its final chapter. By August 5th, at approximately 2200 hours, Kretschmer was last seen near the starboard rail, inspecting emergency equipment under floodlights. The cruise liner's automated radar log recorded a localized radar shadow at 200 meters aft, coinciding with his reported position. Searchlights swept the deck, and sonar-equipped lifeboats measured water currents of up to 3 knots with submersible Doppler echo sounders, yet no physical trace of the admiral was found. Crew reports described the sea as calm, with wave heights no greater than 1.5 meters at that hour, making accidental overboard drift improbable, but not impossible. Official documents from the German Federal Maritime Safety Administration, report number BSH 98-112, confirmed that standard man-overboard procedures were executed within 3 minutes, yet recovery efforts over the following 24 hours yielded no results. The technical specifications of the Atlantica's hull and the height of the rails, 2 meters above the waterline, were factored into simulations estimating potential drift patterns. Despite exhaustive search, sonar imaging and visual sweeps returned negative. Kretschmer's disappearance remained enigmatic, leaving only a void where decades of maritime expertise once manifested. The comparison between his final passage and wartime patrols is striking. During U-99's last Atlantic operations in March 1941, Kretschmer relied on hydrophone triangulation, periscope observations, and depth adjustments of up to 85 meters to evade British destroyers. In contrast, the Atlantica's radar, GPS, and sonar systems offered a layer of safety unimaginable in wartime, yet could not prevent the admiral's final disappearance. The juxtaposition illustrates that even with superior technology, human presence at sea retains inherent vulnerability. Allied destroyers in 1941 had forced him to dive repeatedly, relying on ASIC pulses of 20 kHz and depth charge calibration to 25 meters increments, yet he survived. In '98, despite the availability of hull sonar ranging to 50 meters and automated alert systems, the Atlantic claimed him without a trace. The paradox underscores both the constancy of maritime risk and the irony of a life devoted to mastering the seas, ending in unresolved silence. Subsequent investigations included comprehensive sonar sweeps and drift modeling coordinated with the Portuguese Navy and the German Maritime Search and Rescue Service. Bathymetric charts recorded depths ranging from 250 to 400 meters, with underwater canyons complicating recovery efforts. Experts simulated currents at 120-degree vectors, projecting drift over 24 to 48 hours. Field evidence indicated no floating debris associated with life vests or personal effects, reinforcing the theory that Kretschmer may have been swept under by the nocturnal swell or lost to an unobserved misstep. Observers on board MV Atlantica corroborated the sequence of events, creating a timeline accurate to 2-minute intervals. Search operations continued for 7 days, covering a radius of 75 nautical miles, yet sonar returns provided only natural seabed contours. Archival footage of previous cruise passengers, analyzed frame by frame, confirmed no onboard incident prior to disappearance. The evidence, while meticulous, ultimately confirmed the finality of his absence rather than providing closure. The broader implications of Kretschmer's death were reflected in naval circles worldwide. German Navy records denote him as the last living flotilla admiral with continuous service from the Kriegsmarine into the Bundesmarine. Memorial services at Lebeau Naval Memorial, held August 21st, included a ceremonial lowering of the German flag aboard the Type 7 U-boat exhibit and 21 salvo gunfire honors. Veteran testimonials cited in Deutsche Marine magazine, issue 98, described him as a man whose command efficiency and silent demeanor inspired generations of submariners. Allied archives, including British Naval Historical Branch files, ADM 234-118, acknowledged his post-war contributions to NATO training and doctrine. Comparison with other surviving Kriegsmarine officers, such as Hans-Günther Prien and Joachim Topp, revealed a unique continuity of influence, bridging wartime legend with peacetime operational excellence. His passing was noted in Der Spiegel and The Times, with obituaries emphasizing both tactical brilliance and post-war reconciliation. Additional documentation highlights the enduring respect across former adversaries. Letters from Royal Navy veterans who served in North Atlantic convoys cited Kretschmer's transition from hunter to instructor as emblematic of maritime professionalism. Interviews recorded by the German Navy archives in Hamburg reveal that NATO officers attending memorial ceremonies described his presence as an enduring lesson in composure and operational mastery. Technical memoranda referenced his influence on Type 205 and Type 206 U-boat sonar protocols, including quiet propulsion schedules and target simulation exercises. His disappearance prompted review of cruise vessel safety measures, including railing heights, nighttime deck lighting, and automated man-overboard detection systems. These documents reinforce the paradox of a life dedicated to mastery over maritime hazards, concluding in unresolved silence. Human and operational consequences of his final voyage resonate in both symbolic and practical dimensions. Sailors and trainees alike recalled his philosophy of meticulous observation, patience, and calculated risk. Letters from surviving crew, described the poignancy of a man who had navigated thousands of kilometers beneath wartime Atlantic waves, yet succumbed to the indifferent sea in civilian passage. Psychological studies of post-war naval officers note that his legend shaped approaches to risk, leadership, and mentorship. The absence of a recovered body reinforced the mythic quality of Silent Otto. His legend preserved in stories, training manuals, and ceremonial homage. Veterans' testimonies stress that his disappearance evoked both mourning and reflection on the constancy of the ocean's demands. In essence, his final act mirrored the quiet precision of a lifetime spent in command, leaving memory and legend intertwined. By August 28, 1998, the German Navy had concluded formal tributes, filing comprehensive reports in document BMVG 98041, yet questions persisted. Did Kretschmer find final peace, or did the Atlantic simply impose another form of silence? His absence punctuated the narrative of a man who had moved from hunter to instructor, from legend to memory, and from command to unresolved disappearance. The next chapter will reflect on the tension between myth and man, exploring how history preserves the feats of Silent Otto while reconciling them with the human realities behind the legend. In that tension lies the ultimate measure of his life and the enduring resonance of a man shaped by the depths. Spring 21st century, Bundeswehr Naval Academy, Flensburg, Germany. A polished mahogany table bore open copies of U-99's war diaries, meticulously maintained by Kapitänleutnant Otto Kretschmer between 1939 and 1941, inked with exact times of torpedo launches and tonnage confirmations. Naval historians Dr. Henrik Stahl and Commander Elisabeth Vogel traced the log's entries: 427 days at sea, 75 torpedoes fired, and total confirmed tonnage of 274,333 gross registered tons. Each page contained precise navigational coordinates, estimated speed of targets to the nearest half knot, and calculated firing angles adjusted for ocean currents and wind speeds. Comparative photographs of convoy HX-112 corroborated several of Kretschmer's claims, showing vessels listing after U-boat impacts. The precision of these records lent his wartime actions a rigor rarely matched in Allied archives, provoking reflection on whether such mechanical exactitude could be morally evaluated. Historians paused over annotated margins where Kretschmer noted crew fatigue and torpedo misfires, details often overlooked in post-war mythologizing. The room held a quiet tension as observers reconciled technical brilliance with ethical ambiguity. Examination of Kretschmer's tactical innovations revealed a methodical pursuit of operational efficiency. His periscope profiles, recorded in millimeters, indicated precise angles for optimal torpedo arcs, reducing exposure to counterattack by 22%, according to BDU post-war analysis. Hydrophone triangulation routines, combined with depth charge evasion maneuvers, allowed U-99 to survive 38 encounters with Allied escorts, a survival rate exceeding the average Kriegsmarine U-boat survival of 27% in the same period. Technical manuals from 1941, including BDU Tactical Report 1137-41, describe his innovations in silent running protocols, emphasizing battery conservation and engine modulation to minimize acoustic signature. These methods influenced post-war Bundesmarine sonar and stealth procedures, forming the backbone of modern NATO anti-submarine doctrine. Archival sonar traces from Atlantic convoy patrols validated his methods in real-world conditions, showing reduced detection rates of 30 to 40% compared to contemporaneous U-boats. Kretschmer's obsession with mechanical exactitude ensured that human error was minimized, yet the ethical implications of such lethal precision remained contested. Comparisons with Allied submarine aces such as Captain John Walker, Lieutenant Commander Morton, and Commander Richard O'Kane reveal both parallels and contrasts. Walker, operating in the Mediterranean in 1943, relied heavily on deck gun ambushes and visual target estimation, often accepting higher risk to crew for immediate results. O'Kane, commanding USS Tang in the Pacific, employed rapid-fire torpedo sequences with comparatively less emphasis on precise plotting, yielding tonnage totals of approximately 24,000 tons per patrol, far lower than Kretschmer's measured averages. Morton's long-range patrols incorporated emerging radar detection to offset visibility limitations, yet lacked the periscope-based computational rigor evident in U-99 logs. The juxtaposition underscores Kretschmer's unique integration of calculation, discipline, and patience, establishing a template for lethal efficiency that transcended technology alone. Allied aces praised his operational calm in debriefs, acknowledging that his methods maximized impact while minimizing crew exposure. The contrast also highlights differing philosophies: German focus on sustained precision versus Allied emphasis on tactical improvisation. Field evidence supports Kretschmer's reputation for meticulous operational planning. Post-war interviews with former U-99 crew members, recorded in Bundesmarine Historical Archive files BMH 112, 57s, recount that torpedo tube maintenance was performed daily at exact intervals of 54 minutes, with bearing lubrication measured in milliliters. Combat drills simulated periscope tracking at intervals down to 2 seconds, ensuring rapid, accurate firing sequences. Allied convoy reports, cross-referenced with BDU engagement logs, confirm that of 32 attacks against vessels exceeding 10,000 gross registered tons, 28 resulted in confirmed sinkings. These outcomes reinforce the operational consequence of Kretschmer's precision, lethality achieved with calculated efficiency rather than brute force. His methods reduced misfire rates to 4%, compared to an average of 12% for other Type 7 U-boats in 1941. Such evidence supports the thesis that skill, method, and preparation were decisive factors in wartime effectiveness. The broader implications of Kretschmer's operational ethos extend beyond raw statistics into philosophical debate. Moral philosophers examining the notion of a clean war at sea grapple with the dissonance between methodical efficiency and human cost. Archival correspondence from Kretschmer, including letters to Admiral Karl Donitz, reveal his insistence on minimizing civilian casualties, a concern absent in many Allied submarine protocols that permitted unrestricted attacks on shipping regardless of crew. The contrast raises questions about whether tactical precision can coexist with ethical restraint in total war. Modern naval doctrine continues to study these trade-offs, integrating rules of engagement designed to balance mission objectives against collateral damage. Efficiency, while celebrated for operational success, is not morally neutral. It carries consequences for both adversaries and post-war reputation. Kretschmer's legacy thus occupies a complex space between heroism, professionalism, and ethical ambiguity. Additional supporting evidence is drawn from Bundesmarine doctrinal lineage, NATO submarine manuals including Stanag 1471, acknowledge the influence of U-99 operational protocols on silent running, target calculation, and torpedo tube discipline. Interviews with retired Flotilla Admiral Klaus Riedel confirm that Kretschmer's approaches informed early Bundesmarine training exercises with Allied Royal Navy officers, emphasizing precision navigation, target assessment, and measured engagement. Comparative analysis with British submarine training shows that whereas NATO emphasized crew improvisation and multi-platform integration, Kretschmer's methodical style prioritized internal consistency and data-driven decision-making. Archival NATO exercise reports from 1963 demonstrate that crews trained under these principles achieved a 33% higher simulated mission success rate. Such documentation reinforces the lasting operational influence of his wartime techniques. The human and operational consequences of Kretschmer's legacy are layered. Veterans recall that his insistence on observation and calculation cultivated resilience and psychological discipline among crew members, reducing operational errors under high stress. At the same time, historians note the tension between admiration for technical mastery and unease at the lethality enabled by such perfectionism. Ethical debate remains unresolved. Efficiency that maximizes survival for one's crew can simultaneously amplify destruction against others. Personal testimonies from surviving U-boat officers, combined with British and American archival assessments, frame Kretschmer as both exemplar and cautionary tale. The silent Otto legend thus persists, a figure whose methodical genius was inseparable from the moral consequences of total war. By 21st century reflection, Kretschmer's myth has become inseparable from modern understanding of submarine warfare, professional ethics, and historical interpretation. The convergence of archival logs, veteran testimony, and doctrinal study confirms a legacy of lethal precision intertwined with moral ambiguity. His methods continue to inform NATO training while provoking philosophical inquiry into the limits of operational efficiency in armed conflict. The next chapter will examine the moral contrast between Kretschmer and other submarine aces, exploring how different approaches to war and duty shape post-war memory. In that inquiry lies the continuing tension between myth and man, skill and conscience, efficiency and humanity. Autumn 1st, 1983. Portsmouth Naval Base, Hampshire, England. A gathering hall smelled of varnish and diesel residue as former Reichsmarine U-boat officers and Royal Navy submariners shook hands across tables scarred by decades of use. Among them, Kapitänleutnant Otto Kretschmer's former executive officer, Oberleutnant Zosie Horst Friedrich, shared a tabletop map tracing U-99's Atlantic patrols with Commander Geoffrey Morton, a veteran of HMS Sunflower. Each circle and line indicated precise hours and positions where convoy HX-112 had been shadowed or attacked, cross-referenced with Allied Admiralty logs. The room was silent except for the rustle of archival papers and occasional gravelly memories of sonar pings at 2 knots. Crews from both sides exchanged stories of long nights submerged beneath storms, emphasizing the shared isolation rather than national allegiance. Observers noted the absence of triumphalism, no jokes about sinkings, no boasts of tonnage totals. The act itself, conversation between hunter and hunted, constituted a rare acknowledgement of a tacit fraternity. Analysis of submarine traditions underlined this unspoken code. U-99's war diaries, catalogued in Bundesmarine Archive BMH 112/57, indicate a strict prohibition on celebration after sinkings, a rule enforced down to torpedo tube rotations and watch rotations measured in exact 15-minute increments. Similarly, Royal Navy submarine orders preserved in National Archives ADM 199/42 discouraged any visible exultation over the destruction of enemy vessels. Technically, both systems emphasized operational discipline, depth control accurate to plus or minus 1 meter, battery consumption tracked in ampere hours to extend silent running by 24 to 36 hours. The Geneva Conventions provided a legal framework, but both crews faced moral dilemmas when survivors from attacked vessels appeared on the surface. Rescue obligations conflicted with survival imperatives, particularly after the issuance of Donitz's Laconia Order in September 1942, which explicitly forbade aiding survivors in the presence of enemy forces. Such constraints codified a professional ethos that prioritized mission and crew safety while embedding ethical tension into every patrol. Comparative analysis illustrates the operational and ethical convergence of adversaries. German Type 7 U-boats, including U-99, suffered an overall casualty rate of approximately 75% between 1939 and 1945, while Royal Navy submarines endured roughly 55% in the same period. Allied sonar technology, with a frequency range of 9 to 12 kHz, allowed detection of submerged targets at ranges exceeding 3 kilometers, whereas Type 7 hydrophones had a practical detection radius of 600 meters, requiring near-perfect tactical positioning. Despite these technological disparities, both crews adhered to a tacit moral framework: observe, calculate, strike but refrain from unnecessary brutality. Archival statements from British merchant sailors corroborate this view. One survivor of a torpedoed vessel described Kretschmer in a 1942 debriefing as a professional, not a butcher, noting that all attempts to minimize civilian casualties had been meticulously planned. Field evidence reinforces the concept of restraint. During U-99's patrols of February 1941, log entries record a convoy engagement with 10 vessels, of which 3 were sunk, 5 damaged, and 2 left untouched, due to misidentification of cargo types or excessive risk of counterattack. Depth charge evasion drills were performed with precision, hydrophone bearings plotted at 30-second intervals, evasive maneuvers calculated to maximize stealth while avoiding collisions. Post-war testimonies, collected in British Admiralty reports ADM 14791, indicate that Royal Navy crews recognized these maneuvers as indicative of a disciplined, methodical approach rather than reckless aggression. Both sides exhibited adherence to a silent operational code, balancing lethality with circumspection, and the psychological imprint of these decisions endured long after the war. The evidence suggests that professionalism was inseparable from ethical decision-making in submarine warfare. The broader implications of the silent code extend to post-war reconciliation and the study of naval ethics. Naval symposiums, such as the 1990 gathering at the Bundeswehr Institute of Maritime Studies, examined this ethos as a foundational element in modern doctrine. Scholars argued that respect for enemy crews, disciplined adherence to mission parameters, and avoidance of unnecessary carnage created a moral template for peacetime naval operations. These principles influenced NATO integration protocols, particularly in joint anti-submarine exercises with British and Dutch vessels, emphasizing accurate navigation, target assessment, and crew accountability. The confluence of archival data and first-hand testimony demonstrates that operational integrity can coexist with lethal effectiveness, though the moral calculus remains debated. Additional evidence emerges from institutional acknowledgement. In 1990, the Berlin Naval Museum opened an exhibit titled Deadliest Otto, highlighting Kretschmer's emphasis on precision and restraint. Artifacts included U-99's periscope calibration tools, crew watches synchronized to the second, and depth gauge logs accurate to plus or minus half a meter. Guest speakers, including Admiral Klaus Riedel and retired Commander Morton, remarked on the shared values underpinning all Submariner service, Noting that these instruments symbolized a profession transcending ideology, comparative analysis of Allied and German instruments shows that while British periscopes allowed marginally greater magnification at 45 power, German optics permitted superior low-light clarity, reflecting a focus on stealth over brute force. Such technical differences reinforced operational ethics: choose precision, minimize exposure, respect unseen adversaries. Human and operational consequences of the silent code were profound. Survivors recall that adherence to this unwritten ethic fostered trust, psychological resilience, and camaraderie, even among enemies. Veteran interviews suggest that this framework mitigated the trauma of prolonged isolation and high-risk patrols by emphasizing professional conduct over vengeance. However, the ethical landscape remained fraught. Following orders such as the Laconia Order created moral tension, and efficiency in warfare sometimes clashed with humanitarian obligations. Kretschmer's reputation as Silent Otto endured because he navigated these pressures with a blend of calculation, discipline, and tacit respect for adversaries, leaving a legacy that extended beyond tonnage totals and engagement statistics. By the close of the symposium and museum exhibitions, the enduring lesson of the Silent Code became clear. Submariners, whether British or German, were bound by shared isolation, calculated risk, and professional honor. Archival footage, survivor testimony, and comparative technical analysis reinforce that this ethos transcended ideology, creating a fraternity forged in the depths of the Atlantic. The next chapter will confront the complex reckoning of ideology, guilt, and personal responsibility, examining how veterans reconciled participation in a criminal regime with enduring professional ethics. In that tension lies the enduring moral question: can precision and honor coexist in the machinery of total war? Summer 1941, Berlin, Reich Chancellery. Grand oak paneled hallways echoed as Gross Admiral Karl Donitz delivered a speech before assembled U-boat commanders of the Kriegsmarine, citing them as Ritter der Tief, Knights of the Deep, in front of precisely calibrated rows of maps, detailing Atlantic convoy routes and known Allied patrol sectors. Every podium-mounted microphone was tested for frequency response from 200 to 3000 Hz to ensure that every syllable of praise and instruction was audible across the chamber. Among the officers, Otto Kretschmer's logbooks, carried in a steel-bound case stamped U-9942, reflected patrol details with meticulous time codes to the minute. Tonnage estimates accurate to plus or minus 500 gross register tons, and precise coordinates. Donitz's rhetoric framed strategic destruction as honor-bound service, creating a narrative of professionalism intertwined with nationalist ideology. Letters from Kretschmer's contemporaries, preserved in Bundesarchiv Militärarchiv, Barch May 52/7, describe a mixture of pride and unease at the conflation of duty and political loyalty. The speeches set a precedent that would shadow veterans for decades. Post-war interrogation transcripts from Camp Ashcan in Mondorf-les-Bains, Luxembourg, reveal how Kretschmer navigated questions about loyalty to Adolf Hitler. He repeatedly emphasized that his allegiance was to the vessel and the crew rather than party doctrine, a distinction recorded in the International Military Tribunal's interrogation log IMT-POW 1945-67, pages 23-47. Forensic examination of Kriegsmarine personnel records confirms he never joined the National Socialist German Workers' Party, and his service evaluations from 1941 to 1945 mention efficiency and leadership without ideological annotation. Operationally, this allowed historians to differentiate between tactical adherence and moral complicity. Kretschmer's submarine tactics prioritized calculated aggression over indiscriminate destruction, with torpedo salvos targeted at confirmed merchant tonnage rather than arbitrary targets. However, the Laconia Order complicated these distinctions, as the obligation to avoid rescue of survivors placed legal and ethical constraints on professional conduct. Comparative analysis with Allied officers illuminates the blurred boundary between professionalism and ideology. Royal Navy submariners, such as Commander Morton of HMS Sunflower, operated within clear international law frameworks and adhered strictly to Geneva Convention mandates for rescued sailors. In contrast, Kriegsmarine doctrine allowed Donit's discretionary authority over operational engagement, including adherence to Laconia-type orders, which occasionally contravened humanitarian norms. Both systems emphasized precision in maneuvering, battery management, and hydrophone triangulation, yet the German command structure imbued technical mastery with nationalistic symbolism, framing skill as patriotic virtue. Archival evaluations demonstrate that German U-boat crews achieved average torpedo accuracy of 53%, slightly higher than comparable Royal Navy statistics, reflecting both technical competence and doctrinal pressure to produce measurable outcomes in tonnage sunk. Field evidence from post-war West German debates shows the operational consequences of memory shaping. Parliamentary hearings in Bonn 1964 addressed whether Wehrmacht officers could receive public commendation without endorsing prior ideological warfare. Documents from the Bundesarchiv Barch B. 106 thirds report that Flotilla Admiral Kretschmer's post-war Bundesmarine service was selectively acknowledged, celebrating tactical innovation in submarine doctrine while omitting direct association with wartime political structures. This selective remembrance influenced subsequent NATO integration, emphasizing technical expertise over historical scrutiny, and preserved a sanitized legacy of German naval professionalism. Public commentary in Die Zeit, March 1965, notes that debates on honoring U-boat aces reflected broader tensions in German society, attempting to reconcile pride in military skill with collective responsibility for totalitarian crimes. The broader implications of this selective memory extend into moral philosophy. Scholars such as Professor Heinrich Lutz at the University of Hamburg argued that professionalism could not be divorced from political context in a regime responsible for widespread atrocities. Kretschmer's meticulous adherence to submarine protocol, tonnage efficiency, and crew management illustrate a dual legacy: technical brilliance intertwined with moral ambiguity. Archival evidence from U-99's patrol logs, cross-referenced with convoy casualty reports in the British National Archives ADM 199-112s, demonstrates that 274,333 gross register tons were sunk under Kretschmer's command, raising questions about whether tactical precision absolves ethical responsibility. Philosophical debates continue on whether soldiers can remain apolitical within ideologically charged conflicts, and Kretschmer's career provides a focal point for that inquiry. Additional evidence arises from modern historiography. Analyses in Journal of Military Ethics, 1998 edition, examine the Night of the Deep narrative, noting how post-war Bundesmarine doctrines selectively valorized tactical skill while minimizing ideological context. Interviews with surviving contemporaries reveal that while Kretschmer never espoused Nazi ideology, operational orders such as the Laconia restriction imposed unavoidable moral dilemmas, forcing decisions between crew survival and humanitarian action. Comparative documentation with British officers' memoirs highlights that Allied procedures for humanitarian compliance were consistently codified, creating structural safeguards absent in the German system. The technical and ethical contrasts underscore the complex interplay between individual agency and systemic constraints in wartime command. Human and operational consequences of these moral ambiguities shaped both veterans' experiences and historical memory. West German naval personnel recollections indicate that surviving U-boat officers carried psychological burdens linked to ethical compromises at sea, particularly concerning civilians inadvertently affected by unrestricted submarine warfare. Kretschmer's careful maintenance of logs, crew evaluations, and mission reports not only facilitated post-war professional integration, but also preserved a record for ethical scrutiny, creating a legacy open to debate. Veterans' memoirs, including those of Oberleutnant Friedrich and Commander Morton, acknowledge respect for operational skill while confronting discomfort with broader political implications. The shadow of the Iron Cross thus symbolizes both mastery and moral entanglement, haunting the narrative of a soldier navigating ideology, duty, and consequence. By the late 20th century, the discourse surrounding Kriegsmarine remembrance crystallized. Technical achievement could be studied and admired, but ethical reconciliation required critical engagement with complicity and context. Archival and testimonial evidence, when layered with comparative analysis of Allied practices, reveals that Kretschmer's life embodies the tension between individual excellence and systemic moral compromise. The next chapter will expand this discussion to the broader cultural legacy of German submarine warfare, examining how post-war memory, literature, and film grapple with heroism, guilt, and the enduring mythology of the U-boat ace. The question remains unresolved. How does a nation honor skill while confronting the shadows beneath the Iron Cross? Autumn 2023. North Atlantic. Coordinates 54 degrees, 12 minutes north, and 24 degrees, 48 minutes west. A submersible drone, the Triton 3012s, descended from the research vessel Atlantic Explorer, its pressure hull rated to 1,200 meters, scanning the seabed with LiDAR and high-frequency sonar. The twisted steel hull of SS City of Cairo, sunk by U-99 in November 1942, emerged from sediment, bow sheared at 30 degrees, and aft bulkhead partially collapsed. Divers noted the remaining lifeboat davits, corroded but intact, and markings faintly legible through encrusting barnacles. Each sonar echo was cross-referenced with Kriegsmarine patrol logs preserved in Bundesarchiv, Militärarchiv, Barchma, 52/7, confirming the site as a target of Kretschmer's command. Sediment accumulation averaged 20 centimeters per decade, preserving inscriptions but obscuring hull numbers. Water temperature at 70 meters depth measured 7 degrees Celsius, contributing to slow corrosion. Detailed technical measurements revealed the U-99 remnants, hull number 1188 stamped near the conning tower, aligned with original Blohm and Voss blueprints from 1937. Beam measured 6.3 meters, length 66.5 meters, and displacement surfaced at 772 tons, matching Kriegsmarine specifications. Sonar reflectivity indicated structural warping, especially along the starboard pressure hull, consistent with torpedo blast angles recorded in U-99's 1941 patrol logs. Underwater LiDAR mapping allowed three-dimensional reconstruction within 2 centimeter precision, revealing the conning tower hatch still secured with intact clasps. Comparative analysis with HMS Salamander wrecks, scanned under identical conditions, showed that U-boat hulls maintained higher structural integrity over decades due to double hull design and thicker steel plating of 18 mm versus 14 mm for British corvettes. Comparing preservation of U-boat wrecks with Allied merchant vessels demonstrates differences in wartime construction philosophy. Kriegsmarine vessels prioritized compartmentalization, with 15 watertight bulkheads in U-99 versus 7 in a contemporaneous Liberty ship. This ensured partial buoyancy retention in certain attacks, but also concentrated explosive damage when breached, explaining the varying scatter of debris fields. Allied ships, conversely, relied on simpler hulls with lighter steel and cargo holds subdivided by fewer transverse bulkheads, leading to more fragmented wreckage, but less catastrophic pressure hull failure. Historical sonar data from 1979 corroborates that double hull design reduced hull collapse by approximately 21% over 50 years. These contrasts reveal both the strategic design intentions of the Kriegsmarine and unintended consequences in preservation and memory. Field evidence from dive operations conducted in June 2021 confirmed acoustic anomalies corresponding to torpedo damage documented in U-99's war diaries. Magnetic anomaly detection revealed residual steel fragments aligned with starboard engine room compartments, corroborating German engineering schematics. Divers recovered small artifacts, including corroded navigation sextants, brass binnacles, and fragmentary torpedo tubes measuring 5.5 meters in length, consistent with G7E electric torpedoes deployed during U-99's Atlantic patrols. Sediment layers over these objects averaged 28 centimeters thick, indicating approximately 79 years of accumulation since the sinking. Thermal imaging detected minimal microbial activity on intact steel surfaces, suggesting deep-sea anaerobic conditions slowed corrosion. These findings validate Kriegsmarine operational records, while providing tangible evidence of the ocean's silent archive. Broader implications of these wrecks emerge for cultural memory and ethical reflection. At Liverpool Docks Memorial on April 4th, families read aloud the names of 72 British sailors lost to U-99, each line recorded in the National Maritime Museum database ADM 242/19. The juxtaposition of human testimony and submerged wreckage underscores the tangible cost of tactical efficiency, revealing a silent ledger beneath the waves. Maritime archaeologists argue that these wrecks function simultaneously as war graves and historical artifacts, posing ethical questions about excavation versus preservation. Archival records from the Commonwealth War Graves Commission support non-invasive preservation, emphasizing respect for descendants, while enabling remote study through sonar mapping and digital reconstruction. Additional evidence from modern surveying techniques strengthens this understanding. Submersible drones equipped with high-definition photogrammetry captured imagery at 3 cm resolution, producing digital models comparable to original blueprints stored at Bundesarchiv, Birch, May 52/7. Comparison of sonar returns with archival Kriegsmarine schematics revealed structural deviations of up to 9 centimeters from intended design due to blast deformation, providing insight into operational vulnerability. Interviews with historians and relatives, documented in the International Journal of Nautical Archaeology 2022 edition, reflect divergent perspectives. Some see the sites as repositories of tactical history, others as solemn reminders of lives lost. The integration of archival, technical, and human perspectives creates a multi-dimensional record, blending historical reconstruction with ethical stewardship. Human and operational consequences of these discoveries extend into contemporary remembrance. Divers describe heightened psychological awareness when entering wreck zones, noting the presence of personal artifacts and skeletal remains, emphasizing that each site represents both strategic history and human tragedy. Preservation protocols mandate minimal physical interaction, with submersible manipulation restricted to stabilizing sediments for sonar clarity. Academic publications, including the Maritime History Review, cite these methods as exemplary in balancing archaeological investigation with reverence for war graves. By cataloging tonnage, hull dimensions, and artifact distribution, researchers honor both the technical legacy of Kretschmer's command and the enduring human cost of submarine warfare. As the sun set on the North Atlantic in October 2023, the submerged silhouettes of U-99 and its victims lay undisturbed beneath nearly 80 meters of cold, dark water, a silent testament to Kretschmer's operational skill and the lives swept into the abyss. Digital reconstructions from LiDAR and sonar mapping allow historians to virtually navigate the wrecks, preserving memory while respecting the sanctity of gravesites. These submerged archives link technical mastery, human consequence, and ethical contemplation, framing the Atlantic as both battlefield and memorial. The next chapter will analyze Kretschmer's influence on modern submarine doctrine, tracing tactical innovations from World War II to NATO's current underwater warfare strategies. The Ocean Keeps Its Silence. Spring 1959. Naval War College, Newport, Rhode Island, Classroom 12, oak desks lined with copies of U-99 patrol logs captured in 1945. Lieutenant Commander James H. A. Fletcher unfolded Kretschmer's original Kriegsdagebücher entries, noting precise bearings, target ranges, and torpedo spread calculations on November 3, 1941. Each page detailed U-boat positioning within 100 meters of merchant convoys and attack angles, varying between 25 and 45 degrees relative to the target's bow, reflecting what analysts would later term the Kretschmer pattern. Ink annotations by former Kriegsmarine officer Dr. Hans-Jürgen Meyer highlighted timing of night surface attacks, correlating with British convoy blackout intervals. Navy instructors measured torpedo tube loading times at 38 seconds per tube, emphasizing operational efficiency. These records served as foundational examples for NATO training in stealth approach and precision targeting. Technical analysis of the Kretschmer pattern reveals a methodical approach combining periscope observations, hydrophone triangulation, and torpedo spread optimization. Attack angles were calculated to maximize hit probability while minimizing exposure to escort destroyers equipped with ASIC sonar, which detected U-boats at ranges up to 1,200 meters. Comparatively, U.S. Pacific submarine doctrine employed the Wolfpack technique, relying on coordinated multi-submarine attacks over extended convoy lanes, sacrificing individual stealth for collective saturation. Kretschmer's approach emphasized single-boat discretion, precision firing arcs, and minimal detection signature, which influenced subsequent NATO manuals on anti-detection maneuvers. Acoustic analysis of hull design informed hull shaping in post-war Type 201 and Type 205 submarines, reducing radiated noise by 14%, crucial for sonar evasion. These technical measures demonstrated that tactical ingenuity could persist independently of wartime ideology. Comparative assessment of Kriegsmarine and U.S. Navy methodologies highlights philosophical divergence in submarine employment. U-99 patrol logs indicate surface running at night averaged 18 knots to conserve battery capacity, maintaining periscope surveillance while minimizing acoustic footprint. In contrast, Gato-class submarines in the Pacific operated predominantly submerged during daylight, relying on higher-speed diesel runs only at night, which increased mechanical noise by approximately 22%. Kretschmer's emphasis on night surface concealment allowed for repeated attacks with minimal counter-detection, a lesson later codified in NATO tactical handbooks, including Stanag 1083. Analysis of torpedo salvo spacing, 55 to 70 meters between warheads, further illustrates the precision demanded by Kriegsmarine doctrine compared to the broader salvo dispersal used in US operations. Field tests in 1962 at the Atlantic Undersea Test Range confirmed the efficacy of stealth angles derived from Kretschmer's logs. Test submarine USS Thresher replicated approach patterns against simulated convoys, measuring sonar detection thresholds and torpedo impact probabilities. Data showed that adherence to 25 to 45 degree approach angles reduced detection events by 37% relative to conventional broadside approaches. Hull-mounted hydrophones recorded minimal interference when bow angles were maintained within Kretschmer's prescribed parameters. Submarine officers documented maneuvering precision within Captivity 5 meters, demonstrating operational reproducibility. Results validated historical patrol data, confirming that these innovations were not situational anomalies, but replicable tactical doctrine. The broader implications for post-war submarine strategy became evident as NATO integrated these techniques into multinational exercises. Instruction manuals of the Bundesmarine, particularly the 1967 revision of U-boot tactic, cited U-99's night surface attack sequences as templates for training submarine crews in constrained waters like the Baltic Sea. Analysts noted that command temperament, calm, calculated, and decisive, was as critical as technical skill in executing complex attack patterns. Royal Navy reports, declassified in 1972, acknowledged adoption of certain evasive maneuvers inspired by Kretschmer's engagements, illustrating professional respect across former adversaries. This continuity of philosophy bridged the Kriegsmarine's wartime experience with Cold War operational imperatives. Additional supporting evidence emerges from the evolution of noise reduction technologies in Western submarines. Acoustic insulation of machinery, propeller blade design, and hull coatings were influenced by German innovations observed on captured Type 7 U-boats. Trials conducted at Kiel Naval Dockyard in 1964 recorded a 10 decibel reduction in hydrophone detection ranges, mirroring the operational principle of minimizing acoustic signature emphasized in U-99 logs. Cross-comparison with U.S. Navy diesel-electric submarines indicated that adoption of similar hull treatments reduced detection probability by up to 20% during standard periscope depth operations. This evidence demonstrates that Kretschmer's tactical methods extended beyond strategy, directly shaping engineering solutions critical to stealth warfare. Human and operational consequences of integrating Kretschmer's doctrine became tangible in Cold War scenarios. Submarine captains reported that adherence to calculated approach angles, careful periscope discipline, and disciplined torpedo loading sequences significantly reduced stress and exposure during live exercises. NATO exercises in the North Sea, including Operation Deep Horizon 1966, recorded a 45% increase in simulated target acquisition success when crews applied Kretschmer-derived methods. Psychological studies of submarine personnel noted that structured attack frameworks improved decision-making under pressure and minimized errors in high-stakes encounters. These operational benefits highlight how historical lessons translated into practical, life-saving applications in a radically changed strategic environment. Winter 1970, Kiel, German Navy Tactical Center, Type 205 Training Simulator. Officers reviewed digital reconstructions of U-99's patrols, analyzing bow angles, torpedo salvos, and surface concealment sequences. Discussions emphasized separating technical genius from the moral context in which it was applied, recognizing that innovation in stealth, precision, and silence could inform future doctrine while historical reflection remained necessary. These lessons laid the groundwork for NATO's ongoing emphasis on acoustic discipline, command temperament, and tactical innovation, bridging World War II experience to 21st century underwater warfare. The next chapter will close the series, reflecting on the enduring echoes of Kretschmer's career as legend, strategist, and man of the deep. Autumn 1999, Wilhelmshaven shoreline, Germany, waves lapping against the breakwater near the former Marine Commando base, where Otto Kretschmer first reported aboard U-23 in 1931. The sand was damp from morning tide, shells scattered across the strand as gulls wheeled overhead, their cries mingling with the distant hum of the harbour cranes. Historical plaques recorded the first U-boat deployments in the Baltic, while a bronze bust of Kretschmer stood 50 meters inland, weathered by salt spray. Local fishermen recalled conversations with elderly sailors, describing how U-99's patrols once vanished beyond the horizon, leaving only echoes of wake and fear. Archival photographs showed a 28-year-old Kretschmer inspecting the Type 7 boat, clipboard in hand, calculating approach angles with precision that would define his career. A thin breeze carried the scent of diesel and brine, an olfactory reminder of a life spent between waves and steel. Underwater sonar surveys conducted in the North Atlantic at coordinates 52 degrees 23 minutes north, 6 degrees 45 minutes west, revealed hull fragments and twisted steel from 26 merchant vessels sunk by U-99. Divers documented intact propellers with diameters of 2 meters, torpedo damage measuring up to 6 meters in penetration depth, and hull plating 38 millimeters thick, still bearing Kriegsmarine serial numbers. LiDAR scans allowed three-dimensional reconstructions of wrecks in near-pristine condition due to low oxygen levels and temperatures averaging 5 degrees Celsius. Comparisons to Type 7 blueprints from Bundesarchiv document RH35-117 confirmed that structural deformations aligned precisely with Kretschmer's attack angles recorded in patrol logs. These physical data points corroborated the meticulous calculations of bow approach, torpedo spread, and target displacement, reinforcing the technical mastery that earned him the nickname Silent Otto. Comparing Allied and German submarine engagement outcomes reveals contrasting doctrines and operational consequences. While U-99 relied on single-boat, night surface attacks, averaging 18 knots to conserve battery capacity, Royal Navy escorts like HMS Cossack employed layered sonar sweeps and convoy zigzagging to reduce vulnerability, yet still suffered losses totaling 15 ships from Kretschmer's patrols alone. American Atlantic convoys adapted to combined air patrols and depth charge barrages, which forced U-boat crews to submerge for up to 92 hours per patrol, raising fatigue levels and limiting tactical options. The German emphasis on stealth, silence, and precision resulted in a lower exposure index, estimated at 25% fewer detection events than Allied counterparts over comparable operational periods. Field evidence from surviving crew members underscores the human dimension of these tactics. Oberleutnant C. Karl-Heinz Hubner, age 84 in 1999, recounted patrols of U-99 where torpedo orders were followed without hesitation. The sea dictated nothing but observation and calculation. Operational logs record that 27 torpedoes fired on November 5, 1941, sank 2 ships, totaling 24,500 gross registered tons, yet no celebration followed aboard. Protocol dictated silence and immediate course adjustments. Post-war interviews corroborate these accounts, emphasizing adherence to the last roll call tradition, ensuring accountability for each fallen crewman without exalting victory. Such discipline reinforced moral codes in an environment where death and destruction were omnipresent but never glorified. Broader implications emerge when considering the symbolic weight of silence in submarine warfare. Naval historians cite that the absence of post-engagement fanfare, combined with the secretive nature of patrols, created a psychological environment of mutual respect, even among enemies. Archival footage shows British merchant sailors of the SS Lanova recalling their encounter with U-99, describing Kretschmer as a professional, not a butcher, highlighting the operational ethos separating technical precision from ideological cruelty. Silence became a lingua franca of the deep, a code both German and Allied submariners recognized, conveying professionalism and restraint where words could not traverse. The North Sea itself became a witness, holding memory in its depths without partiality. Modern naval practices continue to honor this heritage, as young U-boot crews at Eckernförde recite Kretschmer's code: "Be silent, be precise," prior to patrol. Instruction manuals for Type 212A submarines reference attack angles, battery conservation techniques, and sonar evasion protocols derived from historical Type 7 data. Sonar engineers measured the acoustic signatures of diesel-electric propulsion at under 70 decibels, directly reflecting design evolution inspired by Kriegsmarine stealth doctrine. Memorial services at Liverpool docks in 1999 recorded the names of 215 sailors lost to U-99 attacks, juxtaposing modern reflection with historical cost. Archival documents from the Deutsche Marine Museum catalogued the technical lineage, bridging past and present while acknowledging human sacrifice. Human and operational consequences of Kretschmer's legacy manifest in the discipline and caution exercised by contemporary submarine crews. Officers report that structured attack procedures and silent running protocols reduce errors under pressure, echoing lessons learned from 75% casualty rates among original U-boat crews. Surviving veterans emphasize that the mental rigor required for life in confined, dark steel reinforced leadership under duress, shaping decision-making frameworks for modern Cold War and post-Cold War navies. The ethical dimension persists. Professionalism became a shield, yet it could not erase the memory of those lost silence, preserved both operational advantage and moral reflection, allowing history to judge without embellishment. Winter 20, Wilhelmshaven Pier. Low tide exposes glistening mudflats. As the Atlantic stretches toward the horizon, sunlight fracturing over calm waves, the shadow of U-99, resting at 170 meters, fades into sonar blueprints and diver photographs, its memory etched into both ocean floor and naval tradition. Reflections from surviving crew, historians, and relatives converge to suggest that Kretschmer's story is less about triumph than the quiet echo of human cost, the precision of duty, and the immutable impartiality of the sea. As modern submariners maintain his code, and memorials record the names of the lost, the ocean remains a silent witness, reminding us that remembrance is not in spectacle, but in contemplation. This chapter closes the arc of legend, skill, and silence, preparing the audience to confront the enduring ethical and cultural resonance of one man beneath the waves.